loss of life. We'll go live to the White House in just a moment, but even before the president gives an attack order, there have been some significant developments on the front lines. We begin with our senior Pentagon correspondent, Jamie McIntyre. Jamie?
Well, Wolf, the war has not started yet, say Pentagon officials, but there is military action, including stepped-up strikes in the no-fly zones and what appears to be the first Iraqi surrenders.
Effects that we are trying to create is to make it so apparent and so overwhelming at the very outset of potential military operations that the adversary quickly realizes that there is no real alternative here other than to fight and die or to give up.
Swirling sandstorms in the area may be one factor that convince the U.S. military commanders to postpone the invasion at least a day or so. Meanwhile, they'll continue to take advantage of the time to carry out strikes in the southern no-fly zone. Pentagon sources say those strikes could continue overnight. In addition, we may see U.S. troops move into the demilitarized zone between Iraq and Kuwait as they reposition for the possible attack. Today, as you said, Wolf, the U.S. military dropped more than 2 million leaflets. These are those specific instructions that President Bush promised in order to tell the Iraqi troops exactly how to surrender. They tell them to park their vehicles in squares and no larger than a battalion size, stow their artillery, display white flags on their vehicles, don't brandish any portable air defenses. It tells the personnel to gather in groups a minimum of 1 kilometer away from their vehicles. It tells that officers can retain their sidearms in order to maintain order, but the troops are told, the Iraqi troops are told, not to approach any of the coalition forces and to wait for further instructions. And as you said, even as these leaflets were being dropped, 17 Iraqi soldiers crossed the border and surrendered to U.S. forces in northern Kuwait. They were turned over to Kuwaiti authorities. Wolf?
And Kuwaiti officials here in Kuwait say that's just going to be the tip of the iceberg. Jamie McIntyre at the Pentagon, thanks very much. Baghdad is a city waiting for trouble. Our senior international correspondent Nick Robertson is there.
Closed shops and emptying streets. The sign Baghdad's residents now fully expect war. This shopping district, until a few days ago, bustling with busy shoppers. Now, most of the city's 5 million residents, it seems, are at home or have fled the capital. Government officials giving no sign the leadership is about to buckle to U.S. demands.
They are deceiving their soldiers and their officers that aggressing against Iraq and invading Iraq will be like a picnic. Well, this is a very stupid lie they are telling their soldiers. What they are facing is a definite death.
At a hastily called extraordinary session of Iraq's National Assembly, the sentiment just as defiant.
We
are ready for all the sacrifices required for the legitimate defense of our land and principles. And the fate of this aggression which they talk about will be the same as before in history. And history will show their failure, disappointment, and will be a curse on them.
As it has so many times in the past, the Assembly sent a letter of solidarity to President Saddam Hussein. For most here now, the waiting seems to be over. The already visible signs of increasing security, an indication of how the war will begin. Hard to tell at this time how it will end or what the new political landscape may look like. Nick Robertson, CNN, Baghdad.
And with the nation on high alert at home, President Bush has been making final preparations for war. As the clock winds down, let's go live to our senior White House correspondent, John King. John?
Wolf, the president's national security team back at the White House this evening. The war planning meetings now twice a day, a reflection of the mounting sense of urgency.
Heading into the morning National Security Council meeting, the question on deadline day, not if, but when to strike.
The president will be guided by the best military advice available, and that will help shape his decision.
Officials say sandstorms, the pace of forward deployments, and other field conditions are the driving factor now, not the Wednesday night deadline for Saddam Hussein to accept exile or face war. In this letter, Mr. Bush formally notified Congress he intends to use military force, saying he had determined further diplomatic and other peaceful means alone will neither adequately protect the national security of the United States against the continuing threat posed by Iraq, nor likely lead to the enforcement of all relevant United Nations Security Council resolutions. The White House said the president hopes the war will be as precise and short as possible, but that there would be an inevitable price.
American people understand that if force is used, lives may be lost, indeed. I think there's no question the country understands that.
A mounting financial cost as well. New York City's mayor appealed for help defending against possible terrorist attacks here at home and was promised the emergency war budget will include more money for Homeland Security.
Now, senior officials tell us the go order could come any time now, but that as the president waits for a recommendation from top Pentagon officials, he sees no harm, as one aide put it, to leave the Iraqi military staring up at the sky for a little bit. Wolf.
John King at the White House. John, thanks very much. U.S. troops on the front lines are ready for battle should the call to war come. CNN has reporters embedded with U.S. troops around the Persian Gulf region. We have 2 reports from U.S. warships, beginning with CNN's Kira Phillips aboard the USS Abraham Lincoln.
Getting ready for war and rallying up the troops, that was the mission of Admiral Timothy Keating today as he flew from Bahrain here to the USS Abraham Lincoln. It's not a matter of if there will be a war, but when the war will start. Admiral Keating says every diplomatic measure has been exhausted and that his job today was to report to his boss, General Tommy Franks, that the carriers are ready for conflict and so are the sailors. Naval forces are moving closer to the beach to get ready for attack, and this reduces reaction time for naval forces but increases the risks to naval vessels. Amphibious vessels are beginning to move closer to Iraq and into more shallow waters. We are also told that if Iraqi President Saddam Hussein begins hostilities against Kuwait or any other country, U.S. forces are prepared to shift focus to deal with the new threat. Strike fighter pilots continue Operation Southern Watch until the order is given to cross the 32nd parallel. Surveillance missions reveal that Saddam Hussein continues to reposition his surface-to-air missiles. He has figured out that if he leaves something in one place for a long enough time, then it will be targeted quickly. Admiral Keating told the men and women today that you need to call home and tell your families that what you are about to be a part of is going to make history.
We can achieve surprise by going about this particular conflict if we do it in a way that is very unpredictable and is unprecedented in history. Remarkable speed, breathtaking speed, agility, precision, and persistence. If we go, the plans that we have are unlike anything anyone has ever seen before.
The clock is ticking. We're in the final minutes now. Troops and sailors are in position, ready for whatever the president says they have to do. Aboard the USS Abraham Lincoln, I'm Kira Phillips, CNN.
I'm Frank Buckley aboard the USS Constellation in the Persian Gulf. We're getting a rare opportunity to look inside right now, the Tactical Flag Command Center. This is the location from which the Constellation Battle Group Commander, Rear Admiral Barry Costello, can monitor information, receive information in real time during any operation. He gets tracks on all of the ships at sea in this area, all of the aircraft in real time, and can at any moment call up the position of all of the ground troops in the area. Now, right now, the Admiral is not in this room, but the Battle Watch captain is on station, and he's seated right here. Just beyond him is a computer screen, and that's how the ships in this region actually communicate with each other. In these secure chat rooms, they send each other messages. Now, you have all of this technology in this room, but also you have something right over here that's really looks like something from the World War II era. It's a map that the Admiral calls his puck board. All of those little squares there indicating a different ship at sea in this area. So again, this is the Tactical Flag Command Center aboard the USS Constellation. I'm Frank Buckley, CNN, aboard the Constellation in the Persian Gulf.
Let's take a look at some other developments in the showdown with Iraq right now. Turkey's parliament is expected to vote tomorrow on whether to let U.S. warplanes use Turkish airspace in a war with Iraq. This month, Turkish lawmakers voted against letting U.S. forces launch a northern assault on Iraq from Turkey. The United States was promising billions of dollars in aid, but the White House says that offer is no longer on the table. At the Vatican, Pope John Paul II used his weekly general audience in St. Peter's Square to appeal again for peace. He also prayed for those threatened by the looming conflict. It was the Pope's first remarks on the looming war since President Bush issued a 48-hour deadline to President Saddam Hussein. Jordanians opposed to an assault demonstrated against the looming conflict as well. They chanted no to U.S. forces on any Arab land, and they burned an effigy of President Bush. Resentment toward U.S. policies is growing in Jordan, even among those who traditionally hold pro-Western, pro-U.S. views. And in Australia, anti-war protesters used SUVs to blockade Prime Minister John Howard's official residence. The protest lasted almost 3 hours. Howard was forced to walk past the demonstration to reach a car so he could get to work. Australia has committed troops for a possible conflict, although polls show 2/3 of the country opposes war without United Nations backing. In the region, northern Iraq has been effectively under Kurdish control since the 1991 Gulf War. CNN's Brent Sadler is in Erbil.
In the final hours before the expiration of President Bush's deadline, we've seen some movements change in status along the Iraqi front lines, not far away from the provincial town of Erbil here in northern Iraq. This was the scene earlier today when we saw Iraqis bring up a bulldozer starting to build a barricade at the Iraqi end, the Iraqi soldiers' end of a bridge across into Mosul. This one of the main arterial roads into Mosul, Iraq's second largest city. Soldiers clearly there making a token gesture, according to Kurdish sources here, to block off that road. Now, at the same time as the Iraqis were making those sorts of movements, the people in the Kurdish enclave have been moving in their tens of thousands away from the population centers, really getting to safer areas deeper into the countryside. Now, we also expect that there will now be no northern invasion, no northern front, if you like. Instead, we do expect if a vote is positive from the Turkish parliament about US use of airspace for an airfield at Haria, which is about 1.5 hours drive from the nearest Iraqi front lines, for an airbase at Haria to become a very important staging post for US forces, possibly 101st Airborne Division and Special Force troops, really coming here several thousand strong, according to Kurdish military commanders, that will come in here, work with the Kurds to both stabilize the area and, of course, try and make sure that the Iraqi army does not try and detonate the suspected charges that have been put around Kirkuk's oil wells. So very important developments there as far as the Kurdish military is concerned. They have agreed to put their Kurdish fighters, about 70,000, under the command of US forces. As yet, no substantial numbers of US military personnel in northern Iraq, but that is expected to change in the very near future. Brent Sadler, CNN, Erbil, northern Iraq.
And we're less than 3 hours away to the deadline set by President Bush for Saddam Hussein to leave Iraq. And there already has been some action indicating that the start of the war could be imminent. Joining us now live from the CNN Center in Atlanta is our military analyst, retired U.S. Air Force Major General Don Shepard. General Shepard, first of all, show us what happened today along the Kuwaiti-Iraqi border.
Yeah, there were reports of some conflict along the Iraqi-Kuwaiti border, Wolf, and people were speculating this could be the kickoff. It was not. What you have is United States forces massing in Kuwait with men, armor, vehicles, helicopters, and just north of that, in southern Iraq, we had missiles and artillery being moved into that area. A responsible commander is not going to allow that to sit there and mass to be fired later at his forces. So if I can go to the telestrator here and show you basically what happened. What we have is the no-fly zone in southern Iraq. Then we have these forces, the artillery and missiles being moved into position just north of Kuwait. We have our forces marching down here in Kuwait. And what happened was no responsible commander is going to allow that. They came in and took out these artillery pieces, making it safer for the massing forces there. This is not a kickoff of the campaign. It's responsible preparation of the battlefield, Wolf.
General Shepard, we've been reporting the surrender of these 17 Iraqi soldiers. Do you attribute that to what's called psychological operations, PSYOPs, as they say?
Perhaps, Wolf, but if so, it's the very early stages of it. We're not looking for 17. We're looking for 1,700, 17,000, 170,000, and then hopefully all of them with very little shooting. Our object in this war is not to kill people and not to destroy infrastructure. That makes it much different this time, Wolf.
Here in Kuwait, I can tell you from personal experience, there have been these sandstorms pretty popular around this time of the year. Not ideal, though, for military operations. If you're the commanding general, General Tommy Franks, would you order an invasion during a sandstorm?
Well, Wolf, I'm not going to put myself in Tommy Frank's shoes. I don't deserve that. But it's always something. If it's not sandstorms, it'll be sunspots. If it's not sunspots, it'll be something else. You're going to have to work around them this time of year. They come and they go. They're up and down. And so when General Franks is ready with all of his pieces in place, he'll work around the sandstorms. I would not let that stop me, Wolf.
And those sandstorms expected to end around April 1st. Thanks very much, General Shepard, as usual. And here's your chance to weigh in on this story. Our web question of the day is this: do you think Iraqi troops will fight or fold? We'll have the results later in this broadcast. Please vote at cnn.com/wolf. While you're there, I'd love to hear from you. Send me your comments. I'll try to read some of them on the air each day at the end of this program. That's also, of course, where you can read my daily online column, cnn.com/wolf. We're just under 3 hours until President Bush's deadline for Saddam Hussein to leave Iraq. That deadline expires in only about 3 hours. Right now, you're looking at a live picture of Baghdad. Of course, we'll keep our eyes glued to the scene. Let you know if any developments happen in Baghdad or elsewhere throughout the region. Plus, pushed into a corner, what's Saddam Hussein's next move? A look at his options. And on the brink of war, U.S. troops ready to roll. We'll take you to the Kuwaiti desert where forces are waiting for the order to strike.
Tough heartburn slowing you down? Try Extra Strength Mylanta. Cooling relief that speeds right to where you need it. Nothing's faster. Extra Strength Mylanta. Soothing at the speed of life.
Moving freely makes my spirits soar.
Flexium works two ways. Patented SAMe helps ease pain from everyday activities. Plus, glucosamine helps renew cartilage. You can feel results in as little as 2 weeks. Feel the Flexium difference. Guaranteed.
Next on Rudolph's Moneyline, defending the homeland, we'll detail the plan to guard America's borders and how the U.S. government wants to protect you against terrorism. Live coverage from Canadian and Mexican crossings. Next on Rudolph's Moneyline. You decided. Once again, CNN is #1. For trust and experience, Americans choose CNN as the most credible news source. More than MSNBC or Fox News. More than any network, newspaper, or magazine. CNN is the most trusted name in news.
We're about 2 hours and 40 minutes away from President Bush's ultimatum to expire to Saddam Hussein. Stay with CNN. Coming up, Saddam Hussein in the final moments. What moves might he make? We'll speak to one of his biographers. That's coming up. We're live here in the Persian Gulf, and we're back in just a moment.
CNN Tonight, the deadline's up. Now what? Senators John McCain, Dianne Feinstein, and more. Only on Larry King Live. CNN Tonight, 9 Eastern.
Thames Army Surplus has been open for 16 years, and we've been dealing with Cox Media for 10 now. They have been the only form of advertising that's truly worked for us. Well, our Cox rep comes down and he caters the commercial to us. Everybody that comes in the store says, hey, we saw your commercial, it was fantastic. What better can you get than that?
I felt so proud of myself because I had read a 24-chapter book.
When he first learned how to read a book, we just said, Austin, you're a reader. You're a reader, you did it.
He began to read and with such excitement. And if any program can set up excitement for kids to read, Hooked on Phonics is that program.
Order Hooked on Phonics in the next 10 minutes and receive National Geographic's 30 memorable years on 10 CD-ROMs free with your paid order. Call this toll-free number.
CNN, the most most trusted name in news.
At this point, almost everyone thinks Saddam Hussein will not accept Bahrain's offer of safe exile. But exactly what will he do as U.S. forces move in remains a serious mystery. Our national security correspondent David Ensor talked to experts who say some of Saddam's final options are truly frightening.
Will Saddam Hussein fight at the border or pull back to fight in the streets of Baghdad? Will he try to survive or attack with chemical weapons and try to go down as an Arab martyr? Only he knows for sure. But former CIA analyst Judy Yaffe says, one way or another, the man she's analyzed for so many years will try to kill a lot of Americans.
I think his theory is, I will do as much as I can to make it as ugly as possible for the Americans. I still believe that they have a Vietnam syndrome lingering, that once they see body bags, because they will, this is not Kuwait, this is Iraq, this is Baghdad, we Iraqis know how to fight in the streets. Those Americans can't handle this.
Military analysts say the Iraqi leader may order dams breached to flood the Tigris and Euphrates river plains. Some believe he may force thousands of Iraqi civilians, women and children out onto the roads, creating a human buffer between the Americans and his forces. And then wait for U.S. troops in the streets of Baghdad and surrounding villages.
I think what is of most concern to commanders, though, is the hunkering down in the villages and neighborhoods themselves that will force house-to-house fighting.
And the goal, the strategy he seems to be pursuing is that he is going to create this fortress Baghdad, what I keep calling the Mesopotamian Stalingrad.
Then, if the end appears near, military analysts fear Saddam Hussein may order the use of the very weapons of mass destruction he insists he does not have.
My instinct is if he decides to use chemical weapons, it will be in a last-case Armageddon scenario.
The analysts we spoke to agreed on this. There are likely to be some surprises for American troops as well as for the Iraqis. David Ensor, CNN, Washington.
And joining us now to talk more about Saddam Hussein and whether he'll flee Iraq or stay and fight is Andrew Coburn. He's the author of the book Out of the Ashes, The Resurrection of Saddam Hussein. Andrew, thanks very much for joining us. What do you think Saddam Hussein is about to do right now?
Well, as much as you suggest, I think he's certainly not going to surrender. I don't think really exile was ever on the cards for him. You've got to remember that, first of all, he's been in very tight spots before, and he's always gotten out of them. So he is kind of a perennial optimist, though I think his optimism may be wearing a bit thin right now. So he will fight in Baghdad. I don't think there's much hope of he's given up any hope of fighting anywhere else. And he will try and, bog the Americans down, turn it into a Stalingrad, if you will, and hope for the best that somehow American casualties are high enough or civilian casualties are high enough to cause some kind of outcry either in this country or internationally, so there'll eventually be some settlement, a ceasefire, some way he can get out. I've always believed he would never go into exile and never surrender, because when he's been facing similar situations in the past, he hasn't done that. And secondly, he's very conscious of his place in history. He sees himself as in a great tradition of Iraqi, Mesopotamian leaders, and he has talked in the past of how people will see things in 200 years' time. So he'll be thinking about this at this time.
Andrew, so you think that if he does have biological, chemical weapons, weapons of mass destruction, do you believe he will order his troops to use them against U.S. forces?
Yes, I'm dubious whether he does have them, but assuming that he does, I think he would use them. Yeah, he'd see no reason not to. And there are persistent rumors that he's prepared to defend Baghdad with whatever he has. Again, it's open to doubt we'll see what he's got. But I don't think he would have any inhibitions about using, he never has in the past, about using whatever weapons come to hand.
Let me read one sentence from the end of your book, which is a good book, an important book. You wrote this, and I'll read it precisely. Saddam's downfall will come at the hands of his own people, independent of outside intervention, a fact of which he himself is well aware. Do you still hold by that one line?
Well, I wasn't, I certainly think he's well aware of it. He's never believed that the Iraqi people love him. I can't say when I wrote that I was banking on, you know, George Bush deciding to commit the US military to overthrowing him, but he is certainly, his defensive preparations have been very much with an eye to preventing any kind of an uprising. He's had troops distributed in towns and villages, ready to put down any sign of, you know, any kind of revolt in his rear. And that's something that, you know, I think he thinks about as much as he thinks about the American assault, because, as I said, he's under absolutely no illusions that, that his own people love him very much.
Andrew Coburn, thanks very much for your insight. We appreciate it very much. And all eyes are indeed on Baghdad as the United States deadline for Saddam Hussein ticks closer by the minute. Once again, we're going to show you a live picture of Baghdad right now. We'll have up-to-the-minute coverage as this crisis unfolds. Plus, weapons of mass destruction. That's what this looming war is said to be about. Would Iraq use them if U.S. troops come in? And a nation on high alert, homeland security in full effect. Will it be enough to ward off a terrorist attack against the United States? A look at some of the measures already in action.
Introducing the Saturn Ion. Specifically designed and engineered for whatever's next. Get a 2003 Saturn Ion L Series or View at 0% APR financing for 5 years. For restrictions, see your retailer.
Business.
E-business.
Sir Speedy Printing.
SirSpeedy.com.
Face-to-face.
Online interface.
Personal.
Productive.
Local.
Global.
Very human.
Very modern.
Easy.
Easy.
Sir Speedy.
Either way.
I don't know what to do, Doc. I keep losing home loans to Ditech.com.
I see.
Customers apply online or by phone 24/7. They never come to the bank anymore. Even my mom got a loan from Ditech.
Very interesting. Need cash to pay off bills? Get a second mortgage with a no closing cost option from Ditech.com.
So what do you think, Doc?
I think you just lost another loan to Ditech. Ditech.com. 1-800-71-FIXED.
You need to manage your business anytime, anywhere. Gateway's new business notebooks featuring Intel Centrino mobile technology help you stay productive with wireless connectivity. Plus the freedom of having up to 8 hours of battery life. Now get 0% business financing for 24 months when you purchase Gateway 450 E-Series business notebooks. Gateway, business, government, education. Gateway 450 notebooks feature Intel Centrino mobile technology.
This is unjust. This gives you an example of the mentality of such a person, of such administration. They are people, they of course have power. We all admit that they have power, but they have power but no brains.
The Deputy Prime Minister of Iraq, Tariq Aziz, speaking through an interpreter earlier today, dismissing rumors, of course, that he had defected. Welcome back to our special coverage. I'm Wolf Blitzer reporting live tonight from Kuwait City. Here are the latest developments we're tracking right now in the showdown with Iraq. We're showing you a live picture of Baghdad, where residents have hunkered down as the U.S. deadline for Saddam Hussein to leave quickly approaches. No response from the Iraqi president to an offer from Bahrain for safe exile, but one senior Arab official tells CNN, and I'm quoting, "It's too late unless a miracle happens." The Pentagon says 17 Iraqi soldiers surrendered to U.S. forces today, believed to be the first to do so. They were handed over to Kuwaiti police, who are holding them at a debriefing center. Italy's parliament has signed off on the use of its airspace and bases by U.S. forces for war against Iraq. But the measure approved today does not allow attacks to be launched directly from Italy. And security is heightened across the United States, with the national terror threat level having been raised to orange high from yellow or elevated. According to today's New York Times, American forces will search for Iraqi weapons of mass destruction just as soon as the war begins. The Times says the search will be carried out from Kuwait by special teams of experts equipped with mobile labs. The author of the article is the New York Times senior writer Judith Miller. I spoke with her here in Kuwait just a short while ago. Judith, thanks very much for joining us. Talk quickly about the U.S. military's efforts to detect chemical and biological agents as they're being used or even before they would be used against U.S. troops.
I think that it's very important, obviously, to the military to take land, but it's just as important to the Bush administration to really find the ostensible cause of this war. And so as soldiers advance in the field, they are going to be accompanied by a team of scientific experts, intelligence analysts, technicians, technical people, who are going to be hunting for the chemical and biological weapons that they are fairly certain Saddam Hussein is continuing to hide. Now, there is a thought that he might have some radiological stuff hidden away also, but few people, in fact almost nobody, thinks that he has anything really nuclear at this point.
But what about in terms of, forget about the long term, in terms of if they use it, chemical and biological warfare against invading U.S. troops, can they detect that in advance to neutralize it, to preempt, if you will?
I don't think so. I think that's very hard to do. Certainly with a biological agent, the great problem is it's almost never known that it's been used until people start falling sick. There are some very fancy and elaborate detectors that have been put in the field to sniff the air that will be accompanying the troops, but basically I think that if it's used, you'll see someone standing in the middle of a field yelling gas, gas, gas. That at least is what we've been told in all the training those of us who've had who are going to be embedded.
What about the whole notion of finding the biological, the chemical, if you say the radiological weapons in the long term? How long will it take to sniff this kind of stuff out, if in fact they ever really succeed?
Well, that's what this entire venture has really been about, because if the administration succeeds in finding these caches of weapons, unconventional weapons hidden away, Bush will be able to argue that this is why we had to go to war, precisely because Saddam Hussein would never give this up. But if he doesn't find it, the critics of this campaign are going to be able to turn and say, you see, innocent civilian died for nothing. And I think a great deal is at stake in this hunt for unconventional weapons precisely because of that argument.
Judith Miller of the New York Times, good luck to you.
Thank you very much.
And you're looking now at a live picture of Baghdad, where time is running out for President Saddam Hussein. More than 100,000 U.S. troops amassed on the Kuwaiti border right now. They're ready to strike. We're keeping a close eye on all the developments. We'll bring them to you, of course, when they happen. Also, ready for battle, U.S. troops on the brink of war. We'll take you along with 101st Airborne. You're watching CNN, the most trusted name in news.
That was me. What a stiff. Back then, my achy joints made it hard for me to get around. So I tried OsteoBiflex. OsteoBiflex has helped so many renew their joints and their lives. You see, it's not temporary relief. It safely lubricates joints and rebuilds cartilage. So over time, you're more flexible and comfortable. OsteoBiflex from Rexall. Put some life back in your joints.
I'm saving $160 a night at this 4-star hotel.
A 3-star for $59 a night. We're saving $100 a night in New York City.
We even got the kids in their own room.
Priceline now has the guaranteed best prices at top-of-the-line hotels. Save up to 40% off other leading online sites.
I paid $55 less than at Hotels.com.
$60 less than Expedia.
I told them the price.
The exact neighborhood. And even how many stars. And they found it. Now we'll stay at a hotel instead of the in-laws.
Top of the line, guaranteed best price. Priceline Hotels.
If you've been investing in money funds, you've probably noticed your yields have slowed to a trickle. The strong, ultra-short-term income fund offers higher return potential and a 14-year history of proven performance. For an alternative to today's low yields, call 1-888-4STRONG. That's 1-888-4STRONG. We'll help you build a strong portfolio.
Introducing new America Online 8.0. With hundreds of new features, there's never been a better time to try it.
You've got mail.
With 8.0, I can customize my email.
AOL's new parental controls I can set up for each one of my children. Now AOL searches are faster than ever with Google.
The customer service is free and it's 24 hours a day.
Call now and get 1,025 free hours for 45 days. There's no commitment and you don't even need a credit card.
America Online has so much more.
New AOL 8.0 with hundreds of new features. There's never been a better time to try it.
You're watching a special edition of Wolf Blitzer Reports. Showdown, Iraq. Reporting live from the Persian Gulf. Here's Wolf Blitzer in Kuwait.
It's a serious waiting game for U.S. troops in Kuwait right now, waiting for the order from President Bush that will send them into battle. We have two reports from the front lines. Carl Penhall is with the U.S. Army's 11th Attack Helicopter Regiment. We begin, though, with Ryan Chilcote. He's with the U.S. Army's 101st Airborne Division.
I'm Ryan Chilcote at Camp New Jersey with 101st Airborne. Well, there's not a whole lot left for the soldiers to do to get ready. The recreation tent is now officially closed and all the training is over. At this point, it's pretty much down to the grunts and their rucksacks, and I can tell you, at least for my tent, the soldiers, they've repacked their bags, it seems, at least 10 times today. A lot of soldiers still lining up at the AT&T calling center to phone home. A lot of conversations beginning with the words, "I don't know when I'll be able to talk to you next, but I will be okay." As one soldier put it, they now feel like they're in the calm before the storm. There's a real feeling here among the soldiers that they're about to become part of something much larger than themselves and that they're going to be all right.
The only thing flying here is the Stars and Stripes. As a sandstorm whips across the Kuwaiti desert, US Army attack helicopters are grounded. A precautionary measure to reduce maintenance. But three-star General William Wallace warns the soldiers and pilots under his command they'll see action soon enough.
The ultimatum given is complete. Although I know that no soldier ever really wants to go to war, we are left with no alternative.
As the clock ticks down to President Bush's 48-hour deadline, the soldiers of 1st Attack Battalion draw their ammunition. When the order comes, these troops will set off across the border into Iraq. The pilots, meanwhile, will fly into combat against Iraqi tanks and artillery. As preparations pick up, an unannounced chemical attack drill adds extra urgency and rattles some nerves.
We've locked in the tent, we've sealed it.
The all clear comes 20 minutes later. Time enough for a sobering lesson about the dangers that may lie ahead. Commanders have been briefing their soldiers exactly when they'll be heading to war, should Iraqi President Saddam Hussein fail to meet President Bush's ultimatum to quit. Time and place classified.
We are first attack.
All they're waiting for is General Wallace to give them the order to roll.
Are you ready? Are you ready? Are you ready?
From where I'm standing, American soldiers and their aircraft can be inside Iraq within minutes. Those same soldiers are only now beginning to wonder how long they'll end up staying. Carl Penhall for CNN in northern Kuwait.
Baghdad is normally a bustling city of some 5 million people. It's quiet there right now, very quiet, and almost eerie silence over the Iraqi capital. Iraq, a huge country about the size of California, some 25 million people there. Of course, many U.S. and British troops are poised to invade Iraq, and many of them, indeed most of them, are massed right here in Kuwait. The invasion and occupation of Kuwait by Iraq triggered the Persian Gulf War in 1991. Once again, Kuwait faces a possible attack by Iraq. Earlier, I spoke with Kuwait's Minister of State for Foreign Affairs, Dr. Mohammed al-Sabah. Dr. al-Sabah, thanks so much for joining us during these critical hours. How worried are you that Saddam Hussein might launch chemical or biological weapons against Kuwait at the start of this war?
Well, Wolf, he admitted that he had chemical or biological weapons, and we don't trust that he destroyed these weapons. So we are absolutely certain that he continued to possess these weapons, and this is the time to use them against his enemies, and certainly the United States and Kuwait is on the top of the list.
Do you think he would use them?
I have no doubt that he had the intention to use these weapons.
How well protected are you and your people? I assume the U.S. military is a source of comfort.
Well, we have numerous plans to protect our people. We have the Patriot missiles to intercept any incoming missiles carrying these horrible weapons. And we have also set up emergency quick response centers here in Kuwait to treat any civilians who might be injured by these weapons.
What kind of indications are you getting how long this war might last?
Well, this takes me back to 1991 when Desert Storm was launched to liberate my country. There was a mass exodus on the Iraqi side. The defection were in tens of thousands, and we start seeing actually certain defection from the Iraqi army towards the Americans and up north the Kurdish areas. So I do not expect the Iraqi army would fight and would sacrifice itself to defend Saddam Hussein. So I expect it to be a short.
Any prospect, any chance that Saddam Hussein might still go into exile and save himself?
Well, I think that he's your quintessential survivalist. I think that he would jump the ship when he's almost certain that it would sink. However, as far as Kuwait is concerned, we are going to pursue him as a war criminal wherever he goes.
Dr. El-Sabah, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
And now you're looking once again live pictures of Baghdad, where military action could come literally at any time now. Our crews are standing by to bring you all the latest information, of course, as it happens. Also, caution shifts into overdrive as the U.S. braces for a terrorist backlash. Plus, what the government plans to do with some of the thousands of Iraqis living in the United States. You're watching CNN, the most trusted name in news.
Epson T001, Canon BC31E.
Shopping for ink and toner in most stores is hit or miss.
HP C9720.
Come on.
A.
At Staples, we stock a huge selection of cartridges, so we guarantee we'll have the one you need. Online or in store, promise. HP 45.
Bingo.
Your ink and toner in stock. Staples. That was easy.
It's a fact. Mortgage interest rates are at their lowest levels this year, but the likelihood of them going up in the near future is a very real possibility. If you have a first mortgage with a high interest second, now may be the time to refinance to a new low fixed rate first and end up with one low monthly payment. You can be pre-qualified online or over the telephone. No advance fees prior to closing, no cancellation fees. Do it now before the rates go up. Call 1-800-71-FIX.
50 is next. Okay, good. Okay. We're approaching 2 hours away from President Bush's ultimatum. Stay with CNN. Coming up, the dangers journalists face covering this story. You'll see our first line of defense. All that's coming up on Wolf Blitzer Reports. We're back in a moment.
Gateway's new 450 series notebooks carry a breakthrough in mobility with the integrated wireless freedom of Intel Centrino mobile technology. You can go far and fast with the ultra performance of the 450 series. And with our spot-on value, even longer. Purchase our 450X notebook and get a second battery for $1 more. That's a total of up to 8 hours of battery life. Spot-on Gateway. Call, click, or come in. Gateway 450 notebooks feature Intel Centrino mobile technology.
You decided. Once again, CNN is #1. For trust and experience, Americans choose CNN as the most credible news source. More than MSNBC or Fox News. More than any network, newspaper, or magazine, CNN is the most trusted name in news.
You're watching a special edition of Wolf Blitzer Reports, Showdown, Iraq. Reporting live from the Persian Gulf, here's Wolf Blitzer in Kuwait.
There's tension here in Kuwait, but the United States also remains on orange alert today. That's a high level for terrorist concern. Despite concerns a U.S.-led attack on Iraq could produce a terrorist backlash, a U.S. government spokesman says there are no plans to raise the alert level to the highest level, or red. Inspections of food production, and food storage areas were stepped up, although officials say there's no specific intelligence suggesting that terrorists will target the food supply. Security has been tightened at government buildings and other potential terror targets in Washington, D.C., and indeed across the country. The alert includes random searches of vehicles at airports and identification checks for truckers who haul hazardous materials. It also includes some flight restrictions. CNN's Charles Feldman has that from Los Angeles. Charles?
Wolf, that's right. And those flight restrictions now for the first time include things like Disneyland, because it's considered a potential terrorist target. I took up my airplane a while ago to see what that restrictive airspace really means.
So we're now coming up on Disneyland, having made sure with air traffic control that we are clear of the special restricted area that they've imposed. And about my 11 o'clock position, 3,500 feet or so below us, is Disneyland, which is, of course, in Anaheim, California, not all that far from where we took off, Santa Monica. But right now, we are legal. We are 3,500 feet above Disneyland. The idea is to keep small airplanes away in the event of a terrorist attack. But as you may be able to see, although we are legal here at 3,005, the difference between being legal and illegal is only 500 feet. And if somebody were in an airplane such as ours and wanted to do damage, I suppose, to Disneyland, whether it makes much of a difference if you're at 3,000 or 3,005, it probably really doesn't.
And no one really knows just how long these new temporary flight restrictions will last. Wolf, stay safe.
Charles Feldman, thanks very much, Charles, for that report. The government is also planning to detain several dozen Iraqis in the United States whom it says may have ties to Iraqi intelligence. And the FBI wants to question thousands more Iraqi nationals. Our justice correspondent Kelly Arena has details.
Most Iraqi nationals living in the United States are of no concern to law enforcement, but there is a small percentage that officials say could pose a threat.
The concern we have now is with the probable hostilities with Iraq, what Iraqi either intelligence officers or other individuals sympathetic to the Hussein regime may try to do in terms of
CNN has confirmed the FBI this week will detain about 3 dozen Iraqis in the United States who are said to be sympathetic to Saddam Hussein. Officials say they are all guilty of visa violations. There is some concern these individuals may have a connection to the Iraqi intelligence service, an outfit, according to an FBI advisory, capable of assassinations, hijackings, and bombings. But the advisory also describes Iraqi agents as, quote, inconsistently competent, and the FBI says al-Qaeda remains the bigger threat.
In the 1991 period, when Iraq launched some 42-man teams against the United States, their special forces attacking the United States proved to be unusually ineffective. Presumably, they've learned a few tricks of the trade in the last decade.
A number of Iraqi nationals in the United States remain under 24/7 surveillance. And FBI agents want to interview as many as 11,000 Iraqis who they say may be able to provide useful information in the war against Iraq. Even though the interviews are voluntary, they are causing some concern.
Knowing that you've done nothing wrong, that you're not connected to terrorism in any way, yet having the FBI come to your place of work, go to your neighbors, do all of these things, it's a very intimidating process.
FBI officials say they've done a lot to reach out to the Arab American community to try to build a better relationship, but they say they will continue to use every means possible to protect Americans. Kelly Arena, CNN, Washington.
A rush on duct tape, food, gas, money, and these as well. I'll show you more of life here in Kuwait on the eve of war. And a live look at Baghdad as Iraqis wait for the culmination of the showdown.
We go through this every time. Red.
Blue.
Leather.
Cloth.
Whoa, now that's a car.
No, that's my car. I built it on the web, and they sent me that the next day. Printed and personalized. My color, my interior, where to go. They even gave me a free CD player. It can be here in a week.
Well, at least we talked about it.
Come on. CNN Tonight, the deadline's up. Now what? Senators John McCain, Dianne Feinstein, and more. Only on Larry King Live. CNN Tonight, 9 Eastern.
Hundreds of movies, millions of emotions. Star Super PAC.
Poor sleepers may be losing more than sleep. At Griffin Hospital Sleep Wellness Center, we know the inability to sleep can have a tremendous impact on your health. Heavy snoring, chronic insomnia, even daytime sleepiness all may be helped with accurate diagnosis and treatment. At Griffin Hospital, we won't rest until you do. Griffin Hospital, changing the face of healthcare in so many ways.
Do you need to learn how to operate a computer? Hi, I'm John Scherer, CEO and founder of Video Professor. You know, our product is quick and it's easy to learn with, and you can try it for free. You know, over the years, millions of people have learned how to operate their computer using our product. We get happy letters every day from people thanking us. But the most rewarding thing for me is having people stop me on the street and telling me how easy it was to learn with our product. If you just want to learn how to run a computer once and for all, save yourself a lot of time and energy, try our product. Let me show you how simple this is. You put this CD in your CD tray. The lesson plays right on your computer. It works just like a VCR. Just follow the step-by-step instruction. I'm so confident this product will work for you, I'm going to send it to you free. The reason I'm going to do this is because I know once you try our product, you'll come back to us for all your computer learning needs.
To get your free computer learning CD, you must call now. Call 1-800-675-3531.
This is CNN, the most trusted name in news.
U.S. troops on the front lines, of course, face great dangers, but there are dangers for others trying to cover this story as well. There are about more than 1,000 journalists now in Kuwait, and all of them are obviously concerned as well. Although we're doing our jobs, we're trying to do it as responsibly and as accurately as we can. We are taking protective measures just to be on the safe side, just to be precautious. For example, we've been given these backpacks with a lot of protective gear inside, among other things. I'll open up this one and I'll show you, among other things, what we have just in case of that worst case scenario. Obviously, we have a gas mask just like this one. We've all been trained how to use it in case, just in case, small chance there's that kind of chemical or biological warfare that might be used in this part of the world. It's unlikely we'll ever need to use this, but we have it just as a security precaution. We have other protective equipment in here as well for that worst case scenario. But on the whole, people in Kuwait are living their lives. They're going about their day-to-day activities, but there's nervousness, there's tension. Certainly the security here throughout the region is serious. Security is, of course, all pervasive, and we're going to have to deal with that. We'll cover this war when it happens as best we can. And do you think Iraqi troops will fight or fold? Log on to CNN.com/Wolf. That's where you can vote. We'll have the results immediately when we come back.
Saab 9.3 Sport Sedan just received a 5-star rating for collision safety performance from the European New Car Assessment Program.
Introducing new America Online 8.0. With hundreds of new features, there's never been a better time to try it.
America Online has so much more.
You've got mail.
With 8.0, I can customize my email.
You can pick what emails you want to see first in your mailbox.
With AOL's new parental controls, I can set up for each one of my children.
I can control when and how long they stay online. Call now and get 1,025 free hours for 45 days and hundreds of new features.
Searching is quick and easy.
Now AOL searches are faster than ever with Google.
I can sign up to AOL from home or on the road.
There are more access numbers than ever.
The customer service is free and it's 24 hours a day.
They're friendly, they're responsive. Call 1-800-901-9795 now and get started right over the phone with 1,025 free hours for 45 days. There's no commitment and you don't even need a credit card.
It's an AOL like you've never seen before.
New AOL 8.0 with hundreds of new features. There's never been a better time to try it.
Closed captioning provided by Auric 8-pound upright vacuum.
Looking for a lightweight vacuum that's really powerful? Try my Auric XL free for 30 days. Nothing gets by an Auric.
Here's how you're weighing in on our web question of the day. Do you think Iraqi troops will fight or fold? Look at this. 42% of you say they'll fight. 58% of you say they'll fold. This is not a scientific poll. Remember, that's all the time we have today. Please join me again tomorrow, both at noon and 5 p.m. Eastern. Till then, thanks very much for watching. I'm Wolf Blitzer in Kuwait City. Lou Dobbs' Money Line is up next, and Lou is here to tell us what he has. Lou?
Well, thank you. America on the brink of war tonight. More than 100,000 coalition soldiers and Marines ready to cross the border into Iraq. Saddam Hussein has just 2 hours to decide whether to stand and fight or to flee. CNN military analyst General David Grains joins us to tell us about final preparations for this battle, whether weather will affect the timetable for invasion. Coalition aircraft attacked Iraqi artillery positions today. The White House says the war will be short, but warns Americans to be prepared for casualties. Former Defense Secretary, Moneyline regular contributor William Cohen will be here to discuss the growing number of countries prepared to support the coalition against Saddam Hussein now. Saddam Hussein says he is determined to fight American and British forces in the event of war. His military and civilian subordinates may not be so confident of victory. Middle East expert Kenneth Pollack will join us to tell us whether he thinks Saddam Hussein and his sons will fight when faced with overwhelming firepower. And protecting the homeland from terrorist attack, security at this country's borders has been raised dramatically. We'll be going live to those borders. Casey Wyan in San Ysidro, California. Bill Tucker in Fort Erie, Canada. And on Wall Street today, another winning session for the market, the 6th consecutive session of gains for the Dow. The NASDAQ, however, lower. Christine Romans will have the market. It is now 6 o'clock in the east, 3 o'clock in the west. It is 2 o'clock Thursday morning in Baghdad.
This is Lou Dobbs' Money Line for Wednesday, March 19th. Here now, Lou Dobbs.
Good evening. War could be only 2 hours away. Saddam Hussein has refused to leave Iraq. President Bush met with his top national security advisors today. The White House said any war led by U.S. forces will be as short as possible, but it warned Americans to be prepared for loss of life. Senior White House correspondent John King reports.
Heading into the morning National Security Council meeting, the question on deadline day, not if, but when to strike.
The President will be guided by the best military advice available, and that will help shape his decision.
Officials say sandstorms, the pace of forward deployments, and other field conditions are the driving factor now, not the Wednesday night deadline for Saddam Hussein to accept exile or face war. In this letter, Mr. Bush formally notified Congress he intends to use military force, saying he had determined further diplomatic and other peaceful means alone will neither adequately protect the national security of the United States against the continuing threat posed by Iraq, nor likely lead to the enforcement of all relevant United Nations Security Council resolutions. The White House said the president hopes the war will be as precise and short as possible, but that there would be an inevitable price.
American people understand that if force is used, lives may be lost, indeed. I think there's no question the country understands that.
A mounting financial cost as well. New York City's mayor appealed for help defending against possible terrorist attacks here at home. and was promised the emergency war budget will include more money for Homeland Security. Now, the National Security Team was back at the White House this evening. The war planning sessions now twice a day. That a reflection of the sense of urgency. Senior officials tell us the president's go orders could come at any time now. But as Mr. Bush awaits a recommendation from the Pentagon, we're also told he sees no harm at all, as one aide put it, of leaving the Iraqi military staring up at the sky for a little bit. Lou?
John, the White House plan, the president's plan, once the decision is taken to move those troops into Iraq?
As soon as the president believes it would not violate operational security, he would deliver an Oval Office address to the American people announcing that hostilities are underway. He will await, of course, as one aide put it, when Iraq knows there's a war underway, then the president will feel safe telling the American people.
John, thank you very much. Senior White House correspondent John King. Long columns of coalition troops and vehicles moved up to the Iraqi border today. Coalition aircraft bombed 10 Iraqi artillery positions near the frontier. 17 Iraqi troops surrendered to U.S. forces. Senior Pentagon correspondent Jamie McIntyre has the report.
Swirling sandstorms in southern Iraq is one factor sources say could prompt U.S. commanders to wait at least another day before launching the invasion northward. Even before the deadline expired, U.S. jets on no-fly zone patrol struck multiple targets in the south, including 10 Iraqi artillery pieces on the Al-Faw Peninsula capable of firing chemical shells, and a surface-to-surface missile launcher around the Basra area. Both were in range of the 130,000 U.S. troops massing along the Iraqi border. Unlike in 1991, the U.S. already has air superiority over most of Iraq, even before the war starts.
We are starting off in a significantly better position as a consequence of the northern and southern no-fly zones, which will enable operations that might not otherwise have been able to commence.
Pentagon sources say more airstrikes will be conducted overnight to prepare the battlefield, and U.S. troops may move into the demilitarized zone between Kuwait and Iraq in the next 24 hours. The idea is to break the Iraqi will with a show of force and a barrage of several million leaflets dropped in recent days.
The effects that we are trying to create is to make it so apparent and so overwhelming at the very outset of potential military operations that the adversary quickly realizes that there is no real alternative here other than to fight and die or to give up.
The front of the leaflets.
Now, these leaflets dropped today show give the precise instructions for the Iraqi military to capitulate, is the word they're using at the Pentagon. It tells them to park their vehicles in a manner that's in squares, and then to move away from them at least a kilometer away. Also tells them to stow their artillery, put their weapons down, put white flags on the vehicles. Interestingly, it says that officers can retain their sidearms, but others have to disarm. The basic instructions: stay put, wait for the U.S. military to arrive, don't approach the U.S. military. Already today, 17 Iraqi troops appear to be the first to actually surrender. They crossed the border into Kuwait, were quickly taken into custody by Kuwaiti officials. Lou?
Jamie, give us, if you will, your sense of the pace, the atmosphere there at the Pentagon this evening.
Well, clearly we're on the brink of war. There's some feeling at the Pentagon that they want to go as soon as it makes military sense. They don't want to wait too long. On the other hand, there's also a feeling that when they wait, that the pressure builds on the Iraqi military and the Iraqi leadership, and they really want to maximize that pressure, want them to be as nervous, as skittish as possible. They're hoping that that'll help psychologically convince a lot of Iraqi troops to simply give up.
Jamie, thank you very much. Jamie McIntyre, senior Pentagon correspondent. Saddam Hussein apparently preparing to make his last stand. Bahrain today offered Saddam Hussein safe exile, but there are no signs he's prepared to accept the offer. Senior international correspondent Nick Robertson is one of the few television correspondents now left in Baghdad, and he has the report.
Closed shops and emptying streets. The sign Baghdad's residents now fully expect war. This shopping district, until a few days ago, bustling with busy shoppers. Now, most of the city's 5 million residents, it seems, are at home or have fled the capital. Government officials giving no sign the leadership is about to buckle to U.S. demands.
They are deceiving their soldiers and their officers that aggressing against Iraq and invading Iraq will be like a picnic. Well, this is a very stupid lie they are telling their soldiers. What they are facing is a definite death.
At a hastily called extraordinary session of Iraq's National Assembly, the sentiment just as defiant.
We are ready for all the sacrifices required for the legitimate defense of our land and principles. And the fate of this aggression which they talk about will be the same as before in history. And history will show their failure, disappointment, and will be a curse on them.
As it has so many times in the past, the Assembly sent a letter of solidarity to President Saddam Hussein. For most here now, the waiting seems to be over. The already visible signs of increasing security, an indication of how the war will begin. Hard to tell at this time how it will end or what the new political landscape may look like. Nick Robertson, CNN, Baghdad.
Some of the warplanes that struck targets in Iraq's southern no-fly zone today are based aboard the USS Abraham Lincoln in the Arabian Sea. The Navy's top commander in the Gulf region visited the carrier today to prepare the sailors for war. Kara Phillips reports from the Abraham Lincoln.
Getting ready for war and rallying up the troops, that was the mission of Admiral Timothy Keating today as he flew from Bahrain here to the USS Abraham Lincoln. It's not a matter of if there will be a war, but when the war will start. Admiral Keating says every diplomatic measure has been exhausted and that his job today was to report to his boss, General Tommy Franks, that the carriers are ready for conflict, and so are the sailors. Naval forces are moving closer to the beach to get ready for attack, and this reduces reaction time for naval forces but increases the risks to naval vessels. Amphibious vessels are beginning to move closer to Iraq and into more shallow waters. We are also told that if Iraqi President Saddam Hussein begins hostilities against Kuwait or any other country, U.S. forces are prepared to shift focus to deal with the new threat. Strike fighter pilots continue Operation Southern Watch until the order is given to cross the 32nd parallel. Surveillance missions reveal that Saddam Hussein continues to reposition his surface-to-air missiles. He has figured out that if he leaves something in one place for a long enough time, then it will be targeted quickly. Admiral Keating told the men and women today that you need to call home and tell your families that what you are about to be a part of is going to make history.
We can achieve surprise by going about this particular conflict if we do it in a way that is very unpredictable and is unprecedented in history. Remarkable speed, breathtaking speed, agility, precision, and persistence. If we go, the plans that we have are unlike anything anyone has ever seen before.
The clock is ticking. We're in the final minutes now. Troops and sailors are in position, ready for whatever the president says they have to do. Aboard the USS Abraham Lincoln, I'm Kara Phillips, CNN.
Strategy in the event of war is to shock the Iraqi military into surrender with devastating firepower. One factor that could determine the timing of the assault is weather. Joining me now is CNN military analyst General David Grange. General, good to have you here.
Thank you, Lou.
The weather now, obviously a sandstorm sweeping across southern Iraq. Is that likely to prevent the U.S. and British forces from moving this evening?
Not necessarily. It's advantages and disadvantages. Of course, the sandstorm would affect air operations, low-flying air operations like helicopters, more than anything else, and somewhat the movement of ground forces to acquire targets at long distances. But then again, a sandstorm like this or any kind of adverse weather is a friend to tough units that want to surprise or outflank or take audacious moves on enemy forces. So it can be your friend.
And in your judgment, General, would you go tonight?
I would go tonight if the forces, the commanders told me they were ready to go. And not just from being fired up, motivated, but truly ready to go. And they would tell you that because they're responsible for those lives. And there's a lot of factors involved. Are the troops ready? Is the logistics all in place? Is the political situation appropriate? Other factors like weather, like you just mentioned. But if the key one is, are they ready? And if they're ready and the timing's right for the troops, then go for it.
The Third Army, the 101st, the Marines, all lined up along that southern border of Iraq with Kuwait. Does it concern you that so much force is massed along one border?
The forces right now that appear to have been moving from assembly areas to attack positions, which is the last position before you cross the line of departure on a ground moving element, that's a dangerous time. It's a dangerous time for force protection. Enemy can fire, obviously, weapons at you. That may be one reason the weapons were taken out that you mentioned earlier, the Iraqi artillery weapons, because they were just too close. There may have been an intercept of a signal that they may fire chemical munitions on our forces, whatever. But that's probably one reason they were eliminated. And
General
so,
Grange.
yes, it's a dangerous time.
General Grange is referring to the strike against 10 missiles in southern Iraq, south of Basra today by U.S. and British aircraft. What is your judgment about the appropriate time to launch the cruise missiles, the air attack against principally Baghdad?
Well, I think the key thing now, Lou, is that you have 2 hours till, hey, you're supposed to leave the country, whatever you're going to do. It looks like that's unlikely. So the order could have already been given for D-Day, for G hour, a ground hour, A hour air attack time to go ahead and start the strikes. Or it could be a week from now. The beautiful thing about it is for our forces in the area, the coalition forces, the Brits and the United States, Australians, etc., is that Saddam doesn't know when it's going to happen. And so there's a lot of stress right now put on Saddam and his forces, especially the forces under him that probably have very little communications. They're used to getting different disinformation from their leader. And so there's a lot of stress there, and that may be beneficial. So the time is of choosing from the coalition forces with many different factors considered.
General David Grange, as always, thank you.
My pleasure.
Still ahead, U.S. and British troops take up battle positions for an invasion of Iraq. The political coalition supporting a U.S.-led attack is growing every day. Former Defense Secretary, Moneyline regular contributor William Cohen will join me to discuss the value and importance of international support in the conflict that apparently lies ahead. Border security has been increased as America prepares for war. We'll be going live to Bill Tucker at the Canadian border, live to Casey Wyan at the Mexican border, and on Wall Street today. The S&P 500 and the Dow rose for a sixth straight time. The Dow up 71 points. Christine Romans will have the market and the cost of doing business when key staff have been called up for active duty in the military. Jan Hopkins has our special report. That's next. Stay with us.
This land is your land. This land is my land. From California to the Virgin Islands, from the Redwood Forest to the blue-green waters, this land was made for you and me.
Discover the endless possibilities of St. Croix, St. John, and St. Thomas. After all, this land was made for you and me.
For you and me.
CNN Tonight, the deadline's up. Now what? Senators John McCain, Dianne Feinstein, and more. Only on Larry King Live. CNN Tonight, 9 Eastern.
Prices below Blue Book, only at Wallingford Buick GMC Used Car and Truck Outlet. Over 100 certified program direct and inspected vehicles priced below Blue Book. This 03 Century $15,990. This 03 LeSabre $19,940. This 02 Regal $14,980. This 2000 Ford Taurus Wagon $89,10. This 95 Yukon $14,940. Or this 99 Pontiac Grand Prix $79,995. All prices below Blue Book, only at the Used Car and Truck Outlet at Wallingford Buick GMC, Route 5, Wallingford.
If you're not helping after-school programs, you're really helping to take them away. After-school programs, wouldn't you rather be helping?
CNN, the most trusted name in news.
Tonight, the United States is on the brink of war. Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld spent a good part of his day with the president at the White House. Joining me is former Defense Secretary, regular Moneyline contributor, William Cohen. Bill, what is Secretary Rumsfeld doing in your judgment right now?
I think he's staying very much on top of the battle plan as such. He's listening to what the chairman of the Joint Chiefs is saying, who's in direct contact with General Tommy Franks from the front, trying to determine exactly when the best time to launch such an attack would be, taking into account the weather, as you discussed before, other factors involved to make sure everything is precise.
You heard me ask General Grange whether he would go this evening, and his answer was, depending upon the condition of the troops, the readiness of the troops, and not simply their, if you will, their motivation level at this point, that he would. What's your assessment?
I think it depends upon what the sequence of forces is going to be as far as General Franks is concerned, taking into account all of these contingencies, namely, we've been talking about shock and awe. Well, there may be a lot of shock and going quickly, but maybe less awe if you don't have the ground forces and the helicopter forces moving nearly simultaneously. So taking into account what their battle plan is, you make that judgment. I don't think any of us can make that at this particular point.
Do you believe that the President has already made his decision on timing, that General Tommy Franks has made his decision as to when to begin this attack?
I believe they have. I think they may fine-tune it at the last moment or second to make sure everything is in place, but there's no doubt in my mind that the President's already made the decision to go, that the letter going up to Congress is a formality as such. I haven't seen the letter, but I suspect it says something like consistent with the War Powers Resolution rather than compliant with, because few presidents, if any, have ever recognized the constitutionality of the War Powers Act, but I think he'll say consistent with, and that letter has already been sent as far as I know.
And in point of fact, President Bush has been anticipatory of the joint congressional resolution passed last October, which called upon the White House to inform them. He's done so, I believe, 48 hours before, assuming action were to begin this evening, 48 hours in advance to meet the terms of that resolution. 33 countries now, 15 others that do not wish to be named, have joined this coalition of the willing. Even the French are seemingly trying to find a way in which now to add support of some sort to the cause. Give us your judgment.
Well, success has many fathers, and in this particular case, I think once the die has been cast and the President has determined to go forward, I think other countries, seeing that they are allies of the United States, and even in spite of any local discontent, they are prepared to support the United States, and we're likely to see even more come forward as this thing unfolds.
Militarily, those who, as it were, join up in are last-minute conversions are unlikely to be helpful to the British and to the United States militarily. Is there anything strategically that they can offer that would be positive?
Some might have some chemical weapons facilities, capabilities that they could contribute at a later time. I think only those forces who have been jointly training, preparing, and deploying with U.S. forces are going to be really effective in the initial phases.
The attacks which we have been reporting and discussing this evening against the missiles in southern Iraq. Great concern that those had chemical warheads. Do you believe that Saddam Hussein has and will use chemical weapons against our troops?
I believe he has them. I think he would be very foolish to use them. It would rob him of the kind of victimhood that he is seeking, that he has declared time and time again for the 12 years he has none. For him to use them at this time would just tear away any pretense that he has had. And I think then the call for the world to come down on top of Iraq and support the United States.
So you don't think he would?
I don't think he will. Again, a big mistake if he does. We'll be able to cope with it, but nonetheless, it certainly would call for a much more robust response even than we currently plan.
Bill Cohen, always good to have you here.
Thank you, Lou.
Thank you. Coming up next, forget the United Nations. The list of countries who support the war against Saddam Hussein is growing. By the hour, seemingly. Kitty Pilgrim will have a report for us. Kitty?
Lou, more countries today were willing to stand up and be counted. 45 countries now support U.S. action in Iraq. Lou?
Thanks, Kitty. We'll also take you inside the command center of the USS Constellation, one of 5 aircraft carriers now preparing for battle in the Persian Gulf. And Wolf Blitzer will have the latest developments for us live from Kuwait. Those stories and more straight ahead. Stay with us.
See you down there. Excuse me, is there a Bank of America ATM around here?
Oh yeah, there's a bunch of them.
Just around the corner at Field and Griffin.
There's another one at the theater.
Down there by the post office. Right by the deli.
There's one on Crescent. Another one right across the courtyard. You know what? Right across the street.
More ATMs where you need them.
There's one more, right?
From Bank of America. Higher standards.
It's in 9 out of 10 of the world's largest telecom carriers. 5 of the top 6 U.S. internet service providers, and 4 of the largest local phone companies in the U.S. What are these companies building into their business? The network capacity they need when they need it, from a network company they can rely on. Level 3 Communications, the network partner you can rely on.
Still ahead here, public health officials have made a breakthrough in fighting the mysterious pneumonia-like illness that sickened dozens of people around the world. Also, we'll have a special report for you tonight from the 101st Airborne. Soldiers there are awaiting their final orders to attack. That and a great deal more coming right up.
You decided. Once again, CNN is #1. For trust and experience, Americans choose CNN as the most credible news source. More than MSNBC or Fox News. More than any network, newspaper, or magazine. CNN is the most trusted name in news.
News doesn't stop for the weekend, and neither do we. CNN brings you the story live, anywhere news happens. Real reporting from home,
CNN Washington,
or a world away.
CNN Islamabad.
As the largest team of correspondents on Earth bring you the big picture, trust CNN to take you there live for the best coverage from around the world. Every weekend, day or night, stay with CNN and see what happens next.
Here's what we're working on tonight for Newsnight. The deadline will have passed. We'll look as troops move closer to the Iraqi border, the increased bombing in the no-fly zone, and voices from around an anxious nation. That's Newsnight, CNN Tonight, 10 p.m. Eastern.
The United Nations Security Council hasn't given up on the issue of Iraq, at least as a topic of discussion. The foreign ministers of France and Germany today said it was illegal for the Bush administration to remove Saddam Hussein from power. And Russia today maintained there is no proof Iraq poses a threat to the United States. Those countries are now in an isolated minority. International support for military action against Iraq is growing. Kitty Pilgrim has the report.
The coalition of the willing is breaking through the record of support set back in the 1991 Gulf War. Secretary of State Colin Powell yesterday named 30 countries who back U.S. action, adding that 15 more countries offered support but did not want to be named. Today, more countries stepped forward off of the anonymous list: Honduras, Singapore, and Portugal.
The most significant aspect, I think, of this international coalition, which now includes 45 nations in total, is that it includes actually 18 European countries, including the vast majority of the new European nations of Central and Eastern Europe. So quite clearly, France, Germany, and Russia, the main opponents of military action in Europe, are actually in a minority position.
One of the first supporters of U.S. military action was Britain. Prime Minister Tony Blair, after impassioned pleas to his government this week, swept the vote in Parliament, 412 to 149. Spain's Jose Maria Aznar was another early supporter, rallying more than a dozen European countries to the U.S. position. Now, other leaders are stepping forward, including Japanese Prime Minister Junichiro Koizumi, even though Japan, by its constitution, cannot participate in military action. State Department spokesman Richard Boucher said countries would participate even if it was in a non-combat role.
They may just be allowing access, overflight, or other participation in that way.
Poland has said it would commit 200 non-combat troops. The Netherlands will contribute 3 Patriot missile batteries and 360 men for the defense of Turkey. The Czech Republic and Slovakia have sent 400 anti-chemical warfare specialists, and Bulgaria offered 150 troops specializing in chemical decontamination. South Korea said it would consider sending non-combat troops as well.
The number of supporters has been growing by the day, with many countries jumping on the list at the last moment. Many experts say it could expand to 50 nations very shortly, with the addition of countries from the Arab world and also from Asia. Lou?
And Kitty, it's worth putting this in context. 45 nations in the coalition of the willing. In 1991, how many nations in that coalition?
There were 38. And so we're well advanced from that, and they do expect many more to jump on.
It's remarkable the number of columnists who continue to talk about the isolation of the United States on the issue of Iraq, with that number of people joining this coalition.
Willing to support on the record, and numbers don't lie.
Kitty, thank you very much. Kitty Pilgrim. Just ahead, tens of thousands of U.S. and British troops are now gathered in Kuwait, preparing to advance across the Iraqi border. Wolf Blitzer is in Kuwait City. We'll have the very latest from Wolf. Former CIA analyst Ken Pollack will be here to discuss Iraq's possible retaliatory plan, including a special look at two of Saddam Hussein's most faithful allies, his sons. And protecting our borders, stepped-up efforts well underway. We'll tell you how they're working. We'll have a special report from our borders with Canada and Mexico. Stay with us.
Are you in on it? Go to the new cheaptickets.com with new fare search technology for lower prices than ever. Or call now for new travel deals on hotels, cars, condos, and vacation packages. Now, there's one travel site that charges no online booking fees. Save $5 to $10 per person. Cheap Tickets, the best kept secret in travel.
News doesn't stop for the weekend, and neither do we. CNN brings you the story live, anywhere news happens. Real reporting from home,
CNN Washington,
or a world away.
CNN Islamabad.
As the largest team of correspondents.
Ron vs. Raptor. The kid seats are just $5. This Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. The Arena at Harbor Yard.
Free to move about the country.
Subaru's 2003 all-wheel drive-away national sales event. 0% APR financing on all Subaru models, plus factory cash back. 0% on Baja Classics, plus $1,500 cash back. 0% on Legacies and Legacy Outbacks, plus $1,000 cash back. 0% on Imprezas, plus $750 cash back, including WRX. 0% on Foresters, plus $500 cash back. During Subaru's all-wheel drive-away national sales event. See your local New England Subaru dealer today.
Life to the fullest. CVS Pharmacy.
On World News tonight, the streets of Baghdad are empty. They know the U.S. is about to attack. U.S. forces pack up and get moving. Our reporters check in. The line of departure is about to be crossed. In other news today, that was some snowfall in Colorado. And in the desert, one last night to think about it. The veteran commander and his kids.
From ABC News World Headquarters in New York, this is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings.
Good evening, everyone. The United States had a busy day today attacking Iraq, and the war hasn't formally begun. But in the south and in the north and in the western desert, the U.S. was bombing Iraqi assets the U.S. command wants out of the way before the big push begins. Saddam Hussein and his sons have apparently ignored the deadline which President Bush gave them. Throughout Iraq tonight, most certainly in Baghdad, the next phase for millions of people is going to be very violent. ABC's John McWethy is at the Pentagon as always, and John, the only guessing left at the moment seems to be H hour.
That's right, Peter. Certainly the Iraqis know something is coming, and certainly American troops know it as well. That leaves just two elements of surprise: how the U.S. will do it and when.
U.S. aircraft struck 9 Iraqi targets all over the southern no-fly zone today, the busiest day in months. Still not war, but that moment appears to be drawing closer.
Make no mistake, when the president says go, look out, it's hammer time.
Part of that hammer, the massive American and British ground force endured another day of wind and sand near the Iraqi border. Moving into position, the troops are ready.
It's time to do this. Okay, each and every one of you has been trained and ready to execute this.
For more than 140,000 combat troops, the way into Iraq is up this road and across Kuwait's border. But sources tell ABC News thousands of other U.S. troops are likely to parachute into Iraq in what will be the largest such airborne operation in decades. Sources say their targets will be primarily airfields in northern and western Iraq. Some may secure crucial bridges or command centers. There is no faster way to get large numbers of troops on the ground ready to fight.
What we hope through all of it is the Iraqis worry about attack from every direction, and that causes them to not only have to defend more places than they would like, but to worry about being cut off, surrounded.
Today there were still more reports of Iraqi troops signaling their desire not to fight. 17 Iraqi soldiers defected to Kuwait. Elsewhere, military officials say there were email exchanges between American and Iraqi units facing each other across the border. The U.S. airdropped nearly 2 million leaflets on Iraq today, the largest drop so far, showing Iraqi soldiers for the first time how to safely surrender.
As for the timing of this U.S.-led invasion, Peter, U.S. sources are saying before the weekend, probably Friday night, but they say dust storms could be a factor.
Thanks very much, John McCarthy at the Pentagon. As you notice, that label today, or that leaflet, said, follow the instructions of the coalition forces. We're not sure that the Iraqis will know what the coalition is. We're going to go to the White House now. ABC's Terry Moran is at his post there tonight. Terry, a colleague of ours, described the mood there today. What did she say? Eerily quiet.
It has been quiet, Peter, very and unusually quiet, but there are already signs that this is becoming a wartime White House. The security perimeter has been dramatically extended over the past couple of days, and the president is now holding meetings twice a day with the men who are his war council: the vice president, secretaries of defense and state, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and others. And as for his mood, one top aide said that he is ready to go. He said he knows he's made all the right questions, he's asked the right questions, provoked the right discussions. This aide said he's made his decision already, and he's at peace with it.
One of the clues, Terry, as to when the country goes is when you get notice that the president's going to want to speak to the nation again.
We are told that we will get some advance notice that this speech will come from the Oval Office, and that is where the president will tell the nation, as one aide put it, that the liberation of Iraq has begun.
Many thanks, Terry Moran at the White House tonight. Now we're going to go to our field reporting from the very edge of Iraq tonight. ABC's Ted Koppel is with the Army's 3rd Infantry Division. When we checked in with him today, we talked about what it takes to get an army on its way.
They've been moving all their massive armor, the Bradley fighting vehicles, the M1A tanks. They've got 350 fuel tankers, each of which holds 5,000 gallons of fuel. I'll help you with the math right away. 1,750,000 gallons, which is going to be fueling some 10,000 vehicles and 20,000 men as they try to fight their way from here up to Baghdad.
Now, you've talked to 2 of the senior commanders in the last little while about what is immediately ahead of them. What does their briefing consist of?
Well, basically, what's happening with this entire division is that it's been redeployed to within a very few miles of the Kuwaiti-Iraqi border. Actually, as you know, Peter, there is a no-man's zone that has been occupied by the United Nations for the last few years. The UN forces have now pulled out of there. Very shortly, U.S. forces will be moving in. That, more than anything else, is to set the Kuwaitis' minds at ease. They need to be protected.
And do these commanders tell you what they anticipate the battle ahead will be like?
Their expectation is that for the first hour and for the first 8 hours or so of moving into Iraq, they're not going to meet a whole lot of resistance. Then they're going to be approaching the first city, and again, I can't tell you what the target is, where they will be confronting a regular Iraqi army division. They don't really expect to get too much of a fight out of them. Indeed, the intelligence reports they're getting is that desertion rates are already up to about 30%, and there is some reason to believe that that particular division may surrender before the first shot is even fired.
There'll be more from Ted Koppel later this evening on Nightline. Baghdad was also described to us as eerie today. Everyone seems to know it's only a matter of time. One of the last American reporters there is Richard Engel for ABC News.
Peter, this is a city that's bracing itself for a war that could come at any moment. The streets are basically empty. All of the shops have been closed up. The only ones that are still open are selling guns. Prices have gone up in an incredible, intolerable way for most Iraqis. A case of eggs that cost 50 cents a few days ago now costs $2. There's also a big military buildup around the city. The sandbag checkpoints that are set up throughout Baghdad that have been until recently unmanned now have soldiers standing at them with machine guns. There are also members of the Ba'ath Party, Iraq's ruling party, roaming through neighborhoods trying to prevent any groups of people from gathering. They obviously don't want any kind of social unrest. And there is also great unrest among the journalists. People don't know where it's safe for us to report from. I'm the last person standing right now at the Ministry of Information. A lot of people think that this building could be destroyed, and as soon as I finish with you, I'm going to get away from this place. Peter?
Richard Engel, and he did get away as soon as he was finished. All across northern Kuwait tonight, U.S. forces are on the move. It's been rough for some of them because of yet another sandstorm. ABC's Mike von Fremd is with the 101st Airborne Division.
Today, the commander of the 27th Field Artillery of the 101st Airborne had a final word with his troops before sending them to battle.
We got some folks moving out here in the next hour. You guys are going to be safe, and you're going to go down and get in position. But you got to look to your left. You got to look to your right. It's the last time we're going to be together. Then we're going to do the road march of all road marches. Whoa!
On what may be their final day here in Camp Pennsylvania, they practiced assembling artillery. But the howling winds put an end to that. Sandstorms continue to make life miserable.
It's in your ears, it's in your toes, it's everywhere.
Soldiers here complain that this sand penetrates everything and that keeping their weapons clean is pretty much a round-the-clock effort.
It's probably good to clean it every time you come in. We clean our weapons probably 2 or 3 times a day, at least.
They are tired of conditions here and more than ready to move north. Mike von Fremd, ABC News, Camp Pennsylvania, Kuwait.
And now to the Navy, which will play such a critical role when the air attacks on Iraq actually begin to go round the clock. ABC's Ron Claiborne is on the aircraft carrier Abraham Lincoln.
The commander of the 5th U.S. Navy Fleet visited the USS Abraham Lincoln today and said what the U.S. is about to hit Iraq with will more than make up for any loss of the element of surprise.
Remarkable speed, breathtaking speed, agility, precision, and persistence.
In one sense, the opening salvos of war have already been fired. Hours before President Bush gave his speech to the nation on Monday, the planes that fly daily over Iraq began carrying powerful 2,000-pound bombs. Many are returning without their payloads. From his command post here, Admiral John Kelly said today, Iraq has been spotted moving around its surface-to-air missiles and military aircraft, an apparent effort to protect them from airstrikes. The Navy says it's concerned about an Iraqi attack on one of its ships in the Persian Gulf, possibly by one of the dozens of small wooden fishing boats that have been leaving Iraq in the last 24 hours.
Lower your ladder!
The Navy has been stopping and boarding them, even sending divers underwater to check their hulls for explosives. Ron Claiborne, ABC News, aboard the USS Abraham Lincoln.
Just one word to viewers tonight concerned that our reporting about a war sometimes puts Americans at risk. The issue comes up in every war. We know of no reporter who would knowingly put lives at risk. We work very closely with the forces we are with, and as you know from the Gulf War, very often the government does not tell us what is going on. Other news related to the war and Iraq today, it looks like the U.S. is working out some of its problems with Turkey. If Turkish forces go into Iraq, they will be under U.S. command. And the Turkish parliament will vote tomorrow on giving the U.S. the rights to fly through Turkish airspace. The Reuters news agency reports tonight that in one Iraqi hospital, pregnant women are so afraid of going into labor after an attack begins that they're having their babies born by cesarean section now. And in San Francisco, a man apparently leaped to his death from the Golden Gate Bridge. Our affiliate there, KGO, reports that he read an anti-war statement before jumping. When we come back, the debate over war, it is still on, and it was very pointed in the Congress. We'll take a closer look. Colorado tonight gets buried under its deepest snow in 2 decades. And at the end of the broadcast tonight, what to say to the soldiers as they prepare for war.
This is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings. Brought to you by Singular.
That's me with his whole family.
So you on a farm?
Yeah, imagine with my allergies.
Go where you wanna go, do what you want.
This is Trisha.
Now there's a new and different way to treat seasonal allergies. Singular, the only seasonal allergy medicine that specifically blocks leukotrienes, an underlying cause of allergy symptoms. It's a once-a-day tablet that helps relieve a broad range of symptoms for a full 24 hours.
Yeah, quite a bit.
Side effects are generally mild and vary by age and may include headache, ear infection, sore throat, and upper respiratory infection. Ask your doctor about Singular.
Morning.
Good morning.
Ready to go for a tractor ride?
You know, I think I did just fine.
Singular, a different way to treat seasonal allergies.
See it create. See it fly. If you have an idea, a plan, a dream, see it with CIT.
Hello? It's Dr. Ross. I have your colon polyp test results. You're fine.
Help stay that way with new Caltrate Colon Health. You may help reduce the risk of recurrent colon polyps, a colon cancer risk factor. Don't wait. Take new Caltrate Colon Health.
The first major advance for the fastest treatment of athlete's foot was Lamisil AT. Lamisil AT was the first non-prescription medicine proven to kill the fungus with just 1 week's use. Not even a prescription can beat that. Lotrimin AF and Tinactin still expect you to treat for 4 weeks. Who's going to do that? When your feet itch and burn, using Lamisil AT 1 week keeps you athlete's foot free 3 months. Lamisil AT. There's no better way to cure athlete's foot.
War may be imminent, but debate about it goes on. At the United Nations today, France and Germany and Russia objected. The French foreign minister said war would encourage, not eliminate, terrorism. There were several full-page ads against the war in major newspapers here today, and it was debated in the Senate. ABC's Linda Douglas was there to listen. Linda?
Well, Peter, it was a rare moment of drama on the Senate floor. It was a confrontation between two powerful men with very deeply held but opposing views. Republican John McCain leaped to his feet to respond to 85-year-old Democrat Robert Byrd. Byrd said he wanted to speak out against the war on Iraq one last time before U.S. troops head into battle.
We cannot convince the world of the necessity of this war for one simple reason. This is not a war of necessity, but a war of choice. What is happening to this country, my country, your country, our country? When did we become a nation that ignores and berates our friends?
To allege that somehow the United States of America has demeaned itself or tarnished our reputation by being involved in liberating the people of Iraq, to me, simply is neither factual nor fair. I am proud of the United States of America. I am proud of the leadership of the President of the United States. It's not an easy decision to send America's young men and women into harm's way. Perhaps the senator from West Virginia is right. I don't think so. Events will prove one of us correct.
And so they will wait, Peter, to see which one of them is proved right by history.
Thanks very much, Linda Douglas, on Capitol Hill tonight. When we come back, the National Guard called out to help snowbound drivers in Colorado. And words on the eve of war, trying to get the troops ready.
Women over 50 and men over 40 are waking up to a surprising fact. They're already at an increased risk of a heart attack. Because of age and other risk factors, doctors recommend Bayer low-dose aspirin as part of a routine to help prevent a heart attack. Bayer is the leading low-dose aspirin brand, and taking Bayer for your heart is easy. Aspirin is not appropriate for everyone, so be sure to talk to your doctor before you begin an aspirin regimen. Ask your doctor about adding Bayer to your routine for many more great days ahead. Trust your heart to Bayer.
Oranges. That, my friend, is the sweet smell of Windex. What? Windex.
New Windex Multi-Surface Sparkling Orange. Specifically formulated to clean lots of surfaces. In your kitchen, your bathroom, all over your home.
Think it works on glass, too? Only one way to find out. Hey, Wilson! Works on glass. Orange, you're glad we have him around. Well, Orange, I get it.
New Windex Multi-Surface Sparkling Orange. Multi-surface means multi-shine. S.C. Johnson at Family Company.
I need a new car.
I need to see my Lincoln Mercury dealer before March 31st.
Think big at your Lincoln Mercury dealer's Think Big sales event. Through March 31st, save big on every Lincoln and Mercury, including Town Car, Sable, Mountaineer, and Mercury Grand Marquis with $3,500 cash back. That's $3,000 plus $500 sales event bonus cash for total customer cash back of $3,500. Hurry, the Think Big event ends March 31st at your Lincoln Mercury dealer.
If you have acid reflux disease, you know about the burning pain of heartburn.
But there's something about acid reflux that I didn't know.
Over time, that acid churning up can wear away the lining of your esophagus. And even if your heartburn symptoms aren't severe, the damage can be.
I didn't know.
I didn't know.
I didn't know. Your doctor knows about the purple pill called Nexium. For many people, just one prescription Nexium a day provides complete 24-hour day and night heartburn relief.
Complete heartburn relief.
And Nexium can heal even severe acid reflux erosions. Other serious stomach conditions may still exist. The most common side effects of Nexium are headache, diarrhea, and abdominal pain. So talk to your doctor and call this number for more information and a free trial offer from Nexium.
Relieve the heartburn, heal the damage. It's possible with the purple pill called Nexium.
Tomorrow, time is about to expire. What Americans should be prepared for here at home. Why this war will be unlike any others. Tomorrow on World News Tonight.
Other news today in Colorado, whatever their other preoccupations, they are having the worst blizzard in 20 years. A place called Fritz Peak, 30 miles northwest of Denver, got 82.5 inches. Boulder was buried under 51, and many other cities have been paralyzed by the snow. ABC's Barbara Pinto is in Denver.
The storm dumped almost 3 feet on Denver, more than 6 feet in the nearby mountains. All of it wet and incredibly heavy.
This is horrendous.
Roofs collapsed, including part of this one at Denver's airport.
This is a special emergency announcement.
The airport closed for its second time ever, stranding thousands. The snow shut down schools, government, businesses, even the interstates.
We just got tired of driving, so I knew we couldn't make it much further, so we just decided to stop here.
But still, this storm is a blessing. Colorado just suffered its driest year ever. Barbara Pinto, ABC News, Denver.
In other news completely unrelated to the war, the president was defeated in the Senate today. His proposal to open the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge to oil companies was taken out of next year's budget bill. It had, of course, been the centerpiece of the administration's energy policy. Some stocks today. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is up for the 6th straight day, gaining 71 points to close at 82.65. On the NASDAQ, stocks were down slightly, losing just about 3 points. And one other note from overseas, in the Palestinian territories today, Palestinian legislators defied Chairman Yasser Arafat. They forced him to give up much of his power to the new prime minister, Arafat's former deputy, Mahmoud Abbas. The Bush administration has said that the creation of a prime minister is one of the steps required before the U.S. will back Palestinian statehood. Next on the broadcast, last on the broadcast tonight, the last moment of calm before the storm.
Introducing a new overnight laxative, Freelax. These contain stimulants that can jolt your system and cause cramps. Freelax is different. It's stimulant-free and cramp-free. It's new, different. It's Freelax.
Overnight relief without cramps. Freelax.
Just a few more.
I should have used Preparation H.
Preparation H medicated wipes with aloe, the easy way to cleanse, cool, and soothe. Easier because they're 4 times bigger than Tux pads. Preparation H medicated wipes, big relief.
The Strauss potting shed, where good hands go to get dirty. Check this out. When these marigolds were potted, they were the same size. Did this one get more sun? More water? No. The difference? This. Miracle-Gro potting mix. Premium organic materials plus just the right amount of Miracle-Gro plant food mixed in. Miracle-Gro potting mix is so much richer than ordinary potting soil. Plants grow twice as big. Have you used Miracle-Gro lately?
Mr. Goodwrench, who is this one and only GM expert? I gotta find this guy. You're Mr. Goodwrench?
Yep.
Which means you use genuine GM parts.
Well, actually, we all do.
Now you're just trying to throw me. Mr. Goodwrench had over 1 million hours of GM training last year?
That's right.
Doesn't leave much time for Mrs. Goodwrench now, does it?
Find Mr. Goodwrench at over 7,000 GM dealerships nationwide.
If Mr. Goodwrench were a tool, what kind of tool would he be?
A wrench?
Oh, sorry. Miter saw is what we were looking for. Miter saw.
Living with my kid sister taught me how not to take care of contact lenses. I love her, but gross.
Using Bausch & Lomb Renew helps keep eyes healthy. It kills germs best, helps eliminate irritation so contacts stay comfortable.
It's not just about your contacts, it's about your eyes, okay?
Okay.
Ask your eye doctor about Renew Eye Health Rewards from Bausch & Lomb. For 150 years, perfecting vision, enhancing life.
With RE/MAX, you expect service that's a little out of the ordinary. So when you need help buying or selling a home, call RE/MAX and watch us spring into action. RE/MAX, outstanding agents, outstanding results.
New Lemon Twist V8 juice has a refreshing squeeze of lemon. It's another way to get your full serving of vegetables. Sometimes it's the only way. New Lemon Twist V8.
Tonight, these bachelors and bachelorettes didn't get to the altar, but the show changed their lives forever.
Haven't you heard? I'm nuts.
See where they are now on the new Bachelor Special. Then, only 15 girls remain, but for 3 of them, the end is near.
I'm in shock, really.
On a new All-American Girls, real-life drama back-to-back. Tonight, starting at 9/8 Central on ABC.
Tomorrow, Saddam's secret mistress reveals how Saddam fears this President Bush more than his father. Why? Watch Good Morning America tomorrow.
Just a brief review of the main story today. The streets of Baghdad are empty tonight as the city prepares for what the U.S. military says is going to be one of the most violent aerial bombardments in history. U.S. and British aircraft struck targets around Iraq today, attacking anti-aircraft and radar systems that they believe will pose a danger during a full invasion. So finally this evening, what do you say to men who are about to go into battle, particularly young men? In Shakespeare's Henry V, King Henry tells his soldiers they're the lucky ones because they have the chance to fight while others are at home in bed. It's the classic Band of Brothers speech. Tonight, commanders on the edge of the battlefield are trying to find the right words. ABC's Jim Wooten is with some of them.
One more desert dawn. A lot like yesterday's and not much different than the day before. But for these GIs, today was different. Now they know without a doubt they are going to war. For these young gunners, only a few more practice rounds to be fired before this final rehearsal ends and the war begins.
Now that we're getting ready to actually do what we came for, things are getting more serious, a little more real.
Justin Randalls is 21 with a wife and baby back home, but still a kid to his commanding officer, Major Dennis Yates.
I am almost twice as old as a lot of them, so yeah, I call them kids, but yeah, they seem to get younger and younger all the time.
It might seem that way, but it really isn't. From one war to the next, they're always young, so full of spit and vinegar, so sure of themselves, certain of their future.
Are you worried? No, not really. I'll make it home in one piece. Just go ahead and knock this out and get out of here. Head home to the kids and wife and stuff.
The battalion's great. No, I wouldn't want to go to war with anyone else.
Another 21-year-old, but his battalion commander is a veteran, not quite so blasé.
Only thing I worry about is, I guess, getting all these soldiers back home to their loved ones. That's my biggest worry. We're like a big old giant family.
And now, on this day, when this family is headed into harm's way, Major Yates has a prayer for his kids.
That God will keep them safe out here, and also give me the patience and the wisdom to make the right decisions so that they stay alive, and we can bring them all back home.
One more day out here in the desert, and now, at least one more night to think about tomorrow. Jim Wooten, ABC News, Kuwait.
That is our report on World News Tonight. As you know, there's coverage on all of our broadcasts, and when the war begins, we shall be right here. And you can read about it all the time at abcnews.com. I'm Peter Jennings. Thank you for joining us. Good night.
Like these, what's it take to cover the world? You have to know the territory, not just report what everyone else has, but what no one else has even thought to cover. ABC News, unique, brave, provocative, unmatched. When it matters most, is it any wonder more Americans get their news from ABC News?
Last Wednesday, 15 girls made the cut. Now the real competition begins.
I'm looking for one step below perfection.
But for 3 girls,
I'm in shock.
The end is near.
It devastates me that I have to excuse you.
All-American Girl, ABC Tonight.
Good Morning Connecticut starts at 5 a.m. Thursday. Who is Saddam Hussein? We'll have an in-depth description of the dictator.
Well, on Thursday, spring arrives. Also some rain. We'll take a look starting at 5 a.m.
At GMC, being professional grade means you do things better. So we gave the redesigned 2003 Sierra more horsepower than Ford F-150 or Dodge Ram. We gave it more standard towing capacity to haul the biggest loads. Get the power of the GMC Sierra. We are professional grade. GM owners or lessees can get $3,000 total cash back on a new Sierra. See the pros at your local GMC dealers.
Hey, Rick, is that you?
Jim? Hey!
Looks like you're on your way to work.
Yeah, Subway.
The one right up at the next stop?
That's the one.
Hey, anything new at Subway?
Well, it's funny you should ask, because right now Subway has a spicy buffalo chicken sandwich. Tender chicken strips topped with Frank's Red Hot Cayenne pepper sauce and a creamy ranch dressing, all on fresh baked gourmet bread.
We're getting good at this.
This is Jeopardy! Clue Crew member Sarah Whitcomb, call sign Witty. Keep a tight formation around your TV set for clues about the Blue Angels. Roger, over and out.
This is Jeopardy! Here are today's contestants. An intellectual property attorney, originally from Arkansas City, Kansas, David Frazee. A medical student from Oceanside, New York, Erica Weinberg. And our returning champion, a senior clinical data coordinator from Cary, North Carolina, Amanda Pat.
Us all feel that this is a sad day
for the United Nations and the international community.
Plus, will Saddam Hussein run if the bombs start falling? We'll ask his biographer. Tonight on Crossfire. Live from the George Washington University, Paul Begala and Tucker Carlson.
Welcome to a special countdown edition of Crossfire. Saddam Hussein has precisely 59 minutes to leave Iraq to avoid war. Doesn't look like he's going to, so in addition to keeping our eyes on the clock, we'll also be spending the next hour looking at the big picture. What is the military's likely strategy? What obstacles can Iraq put in the way? And what happens once we win? A couple of retired officers who are CNN military analysts will join us. We'll also ask Saddam Hussein's biographer how the Iraqi dictator is likely to react when hundreds of thousands of American soldiers come streaming across his borders.
It is a little after 3 a.m. in Baghdad. It's about 7 p.m. here in Washington, of course, and our CNN correspondents all over the world are working around the clock. As that deadline for Saddam Hussein to leave Iraq approaches, we are joined now by three of the best in the business. Wolf Blitzer, who is in Kuwait, Suzanne Malveaux, who is at the White House, and Jamie McIntyre, our senior Pentagon correspondent. Wolf, what is going on in Kuwait City right now, sir?
Well, in Kuwait City, they're bracing for the start of this war. They think it could be imminent. They think it could be perhaps hours away, maybe another day or two, but by no doubt, officials here from the top leadership on down, as well as rank and file Kuwaitis, they certainly support the Bush administration. They support the U.S. government. They know firsthand what Iraqi military occupation is like, having experienced that a dozen years ago. Now, up in the northern part of Kuwait earlier today, along the border with Iraq, the first Iraqi soldiers actually surrendered. 17 Iraqi soldiers surrendered to U.S. troops along the border, and they were handed over to Kuwaiti forces in the northern part of the country. By the way, in the northern part of Iraq today, they had some significant sandstorms, which could hamper U.S. attack helicopters, ground forces, if the order is given. Elsewhere in the region, Turkey, the government of Turkey, the new government of Turkey, looks like it's going to give the Bush administration, the United States and its coalition partners, specifically Britain, permission to fly over Turkey, to use Turkish airspace to attack areas in Iraq. But so far, no official word on the use of Turkey as a base to launch ground strikes. And the Bush administration, the Bush administration earlier saying that that $6 billion aid offer, that aid package to Turkey, no longer on the table right now. As far as what Saddam Hussein will do, the king of Bahrain, not far away from where I am right now, he made an offer, a public offer to Saddam Hussein, saying he could have safe sanctuary. He could live in exile quietly for the rest of his life in Bahrain if he decides to leave Baghdad at this late hour. No indications from the Iraqi government in the next several minutes, of course, as you say, that Saddam Hussein is going to do anything like that. But a generous offer from the king of Bahrain to see if war can be averted. Paul?
Wolf, it's Tucker. You're in Kuwait City, which I think is only about 40 miles from the Iraqi border. Give us a sense of how people in Kuwait City are reacting. Is there panic?
Well, they're remarkably calm people here. It's a little bit further away from the border, but still remarkably calm here in Kuwait City. Most residents accepting the possibility, the likelihood now, the near certainty that there will be a war. There's been some shopping at the stores. They've been going out buying the kinds of batteries, even duct tape, water, things that they would need in this kind of a situation, things all of us who live through terror scares in the United States are very familiar with. But by and large, the leadership here, as well as rank and file Kuwaitis, they're relying on the protection of the U.S. military. There are Patriot air defense missile batteries all over the place, so they think it's relatively secure, and they're bracing for the best.
Wolf Blitzer in Kuwait City. Be well, friend. Be safe, and thank you for that report. I know we're going to be seeing an awful lot of you lately. President Bush, meanwhile, here at home, took care of the very last formality he needed to before he can launch an attack in Iraq. In accordance with last fall's congressional authorization for the use of force in Iraq, the president today sent a letter to Congress, officially informing the Congress of his determination that diplomacy will not work in the effort to disarm Saddam Hussein. For more on our President's Day, we go to CNN White House correspondent Suzanne Malveaux. Suzanne, a busy day at the White House?
Well, Paul, it's really been an extraordinary day at the White House with an hour and counting here. No one believes that Saddam Hussein is going to leave his country. We are all now simply waiting for war. The president earlier today met with his National Security Council. He also met with Defense Secretary Rumsfeld at least twice, as well as General Myers. He was given the latest information, the detail in the war plans. We are told he was updated about the conditions in the region, including the weather conditions, as well as those forward troop movements. All of this for the president to determine when is the best time for the U.S. to strike.
I think the president made very plain to the American people that as a result of Saddam Hussein's failure to disarm and his possession of weapons of mass destruction, he has come to the determination that the only way to enforce the United Nations resolutions now is through the use of force.
And today, several hundred protesters gathered outside of the White House. Anti-war protesters, several dozen were arrested when they would not leave Lafayette Park, just right across the street, when U.S. Park Police closed it down. They were kneeling on Pennsylvania Avenue. That's when they were arrested. There have been protests around the country on this day. Many people are very anxious about what is about to happen. Tucker?
Suzanne, tell us about some of the preparations here in the United States. The administration has said it's concerned about homeland security. Did the president address that all today?
Well, he actually met with the Secretary of Homeland Security, Tom Ridge, as well as the Mayor of New York City, Michael Bloomberg, to discuss exactly that, the preparations that they're making, obviously saying that that it's going to become much more dangerous for Americans in terms of terrorist attacks when this war actually happens. They're going to be upping the protection of bridges as well as ports. We have even seen, just within the last 24 hours, increased security here around the White House. There is a perimeter that's been expanded so people are not actually able to get that close to the White House. Actually, the White House press corps needs to present its own pass about a block away before you get to the grounds. Paul?
Suzanne Melville at the White House. You may be up late tonight. Thanks very much. Although bombs are not yet falling on Baghdad, as you can see by this live picture, U.S. and coalition warplanes today struck a number of artillery sites in Iraq's southern no-fly zone. For more on the military moves, here is CNN's senior Pentagon correspondent Jamie McIntyre. Jamie, what is the latest?
Well, Tucker, we've been expecting this as the U.S. gets closer to invading Iraq. The U.S. identified several days ago several artillery pieces, long-range artillery pieces they said were within range of U.S. troops gathered in Kuwait. They're supposedly capable of launching chemical munitions. Well, today, in heavier than usual strikes in the southern no-fly zone, the U.S. military attacked those 10 artillery pieces, as well as another surface-to-surface missile site and also some cable repeater stations, defense radars, again, softening up the battlefield as the U.S. prepares to invade. But the U.S. stresses this was not the beginning of the war. It is action that was authorized in the southern no-fly zone. At this point, no U.S. troops have crossed the border into Iraq, except, of course, for special operations troops who go in without the Pentagon acknowledging that publicly.
Jamie, it's Paul. In 51 minutes by my watch, the president will be absolutely free to give the fire-at-will order, the go order. What advice are his senior military leaders giving him as to the timing? The president said in his speech the other night, we will attack at the time of our choosing. What advice is he getting on timing?
Well, if he's like most commanders-in-chief, they will leave that precise timing to the military commanders who are going to evaluate all the conditions on the ground, including these sandstorms they've had lately, which make it hard for helicopters to fly. Just taking a look at how things are moving. One thing they might want to do is they're putting a lot of pressure on the Iraqi regime and on the Iraqi military to try to surrender. They're sending leaflets out with instructions on how to surrender. They may want to have a little time to let that sink in. You know, sort of like when somebody calls a timeout when they're going to kick a field goal in the football game to make them think about it. They may want to just give them a timeout to think about the psychological impact of as they go to bed tonight, they don't know if this is their last night before they are going to meet the might of the U.S. military. But the commanders will make that decision, try to preserve some tactical surprise in not just when the U.S. goes in, but exactly how they do it.
Jamie McIntyre at the Pentagon, thank you for that fascinating report, and thank you for staying on top of all the news breaking out of the Pentagon. We've got to take a break now as the deadline approaches, and when we come back, we will talk about the American invasion of Iraq. You know, presidents never publicly rule any military option in or out, but what military strategy and which battlefield tactics will prove the most effective when America goes to war? We will ask retired General and former NATO Supreme Commander Wesley Clark when he steps into the Crossfire next. A little bit later, we'll take you back to Kuwait for the very latest as we count down to the deadline. Stay with us.
Crossfire is brought to you by Public Transportation, wherever life takes you.
It's all about efficiency.
It's your thing. Do what you want to do. We're going to the fair. I can't tell you who to sock it to.
It's my other set of wheels.
Gets me to class.
I'm going to see my boyfriend.
We went to the fair, all right.
It's your thing.
Public transportation, wherever life takes you.
Mr. Goodwrench, who is this one and only GM expert? I gotta find this guy. So, Fred, you are Mr. Goodwrench?
That's right.
You say you're Mr. Goodwrench, but that guy says he's Mr. Goodwrench. Well, I'd have a little talk with Chirpy over there, but that's just me. That's how I roll.
And you're Mr. Goodwrench. That's right.
Huh. Will the real Mr. Goodwrench please step forward?
Find Mr. Goodwrench at over 7,000 GM dealerships nationwide.
All right, pal. Give me the bullhorn.
No.
You need to manage your business anytime, anywhere. Gateway's new business notebooks featuring Intel Centrino mobile technology help you stay productive with wireless connectivity. Plus the freedom of having up to 8 hours of battery life. Now get 0% business financing for 24 months when you purchase Gateway 450E Series business notebooks. Gateway, business, government, education. Gateway 450 notebooks feature Intel Centrino mobile technology.
Applying for a second mortgage is fast and easy with Ditech.com.
One of the things that we liked about Ditech were the competitive rates and closing costs. In addition, we were able to take a second mortgage, which is very convenient.
If you need cash to consolidate bills or pay off high-interest credit cards, apply now for a second mortgage with a no closing cost option from Ditech.com.
I recommend Ditech to everyone. They're really nice people to work with.
Ditech.com. Call 1-800-71-FIXED.
Introducing New America Online 8.0. With hundreds of new features, there's never been a better time to try it.
You've got mail.
With 8.0, I can customize my email.
AOL's new parental controls I can set up for each one of my children.
Now AOL searches are faster than ever with Google.
The customer service is free and it's 24 hours a day.
Call now and get 1,025 free hours for 45 days. There's no commitment and you don't even need a credit card.
America Online has so much more.
New AOL 8.0 with hundreds of new features, there's never been a better time to try it.
Welcome back to Crossfire. We are precisely 46 minutes and 37 seconds, if my watch is accurate, away from President Bush's deadline for Saddam Hussein and his sons to leave Iraq. Now, assuming the obvious that Saddam stays put, the U.S. is prepared to put plenty of hardware and manpower into action to enforce the president's declaration. Here to talk about it, a man with firsthand knowledge of using American military power to dislodge a dictator, retired Army General, former NATO Supreme Commander, General Wesley Clark. He led the successful 1999 war to stop ethnic cleansing in Kosovo. He's now a CNN military analyst.
Clark, good to see you, sir. Good to see you. Now, General Clark, our viewers will be in a second, I think, looking at live pictures from our camera in Baghdad. When do you think this campaign is going to start, and do you think it will start in Baghdad?
Well, it's a mystery, really. I mean, we just don't know. Technically, it could start in an hour. It might not start until
47 minutes.
It might not start until noon tomorrow. It might start in the middle of the night tomorrow night. There are advantages and disadvantages any way you go on this.
What are the criteria you'd use if you were commanding this operation? I mean, how would you make the judgment about when to start?
Well, obviously you're not going to start until the troops are ready, but Tommy Franks has said the troops are ready. So now it's a matter of what's your best opportunity to get tactical surprise, plus how well is the psychological operation working, and will you gain something if you let it delay a little bit longer? So they may decide to let it cook.
Right. Jamie McIntyre earlier said that some of the thinking of the Pentagon is, hey, ice him like a field goal kicker in a big game. You must be having flashbacks back to March of 1999. President Clinton sent his emissary, Richard Holbrooke, to meet Slobodan Milosevic, the dictator who was then Serbian leader. Gave him an ultimatum, gave him a warning. He rejected it as well. You then were the man who got the go order. You had all the forces of NATO arrayed before you. How does General Franks General Myers, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. How do those generals decide which tools to deploy when? What do you start with?
Well, you have to start with what your objective is. And in the case of Kosovo, we started in the summer of 1998, working on an air campaign plan. And we briefed it to NATO, and then we began the planning. And I remember doing the first video teleconference, I was in Los Angeles, and my air commander was in Europe, and we sat there in a beautiful summer day, both in Stuttgart, Germany, and in Los Angeles, thinking, can this be true? We're really going to plan this campaign against Slobodan Milosevic.
And which piece of hardware do you begin with?
Well thought out.
The stealth and...
They've worked this. This one will probably be the stealth bomber, the B-2. Probably start with Tomahawk missiles. Probably start with air-launched cruise missiles. They're unmanned, so there's a lower risk. They can be programmed in advance. We'll
so
probably
they'll be fired out of aircraft and then out of sea-based Tomahawk
aircraft, submarines, cruisers, destroyers. They all fire these, and they'll all be orchestrated. They know the routes. They know the targets. It's an enormous planning process. But that'll probably be the first weapon that goes in.
And then the B-2 you mentioned. Tell our audience that not as familiar.
B-2 stealth bomber carries the Joint Direct Attack munitions, JDAM. It's a GPS-guided bomb, inertial with a satellite update, so it's very, very accurate. You don't have to see the target. You just have to know where it is. You put the coordinates in. The aircraft's flying out of range and probably out of any detection. It's very, very reliable. And we got a lot of them.
How long after that point, General, do ground troops move in?
Well, that's really the commander's call. They could move immediately, or they could wait. But in this case, we've softened up his air defenses. We've got complete air superiority over the southern no-fly zone. So my guess is they'll move pretty quick.
Well, what about Iraq's Scuds? I mean, does Iraq have any that still work, and are they capable of hitting Israel or Qatar or Kuwait?
We think he's got about 24 Scuds. We don't know whether they're workable. Chances are they are. He's going to have to launch them within a certain zone in western Iraq in order to hit Israel. He can't launch them from anywhere because they don't have enough range. He can launch them from south of Baghdad and hit Kuwait. And he has the shorter range, the 90-plus mile Al-Samud 2 missiles that we've been trying to get destroyed. So he does have means of striking friendly countries.
Why is it hard to destroy them? I mean, they must be physically large. Can our satellites determine where they are, or are they easy to hide?
Well, they were hidden when they were parked during the Gulf War. We spent about 10 years looking at the problem afterwards, and apparently some of them were parked under bridges and things where the satellites just didn't see them.
How big are they? Just give us a sense of what does a Scud look
60
like?
feet long, 70 feet long, big tractor trailer truck. You'd think, why, my goodness, but there are lots of tractor trailer trucks in Iraq, and the satellite is like looking through a soda straw at the carpet. And just imagine walking over the carpet looking for something, looking through a soda straw. I mean, you may or may not see it, and it's not reporting something moving. It's just a strip of pictures, and so it's a matter of luck whether you actually detect these things. Now, that was 1991. We've gotten a lot better since then. I think we've got very good chances to stop the Scud problem entirely this time.
Well, let me get you to pull back the lens a little bit and talk about objectives. In Kosovo, it was to stop ethnic cleansing, to remove Milosevic, send him off to trial for war crimes. That's happened. Nobody has any doubt that militarily we'll achieve our objectives in Iraq of deposing Saddam Hussein and then over time disarming the country. We also have to build a democracy there according to our stated war aims, right?
Well, that's right. I mean, you got to go back to the beginning. I mean, we originally did this because you had weapons of mass destruction. So one objective is you got to get to the weapons of mass destruction. It's really not about Saddam's military. They're just in the way. You've got to get the weapons of mass destruction out. But then at the same time that we're doing this, we've got to keep an eye on North Korea, because if the problem is to prevent weapons proliferation, of nuclear weapons in particular, which is what we were talking about, because lots of people have got chemical and biological weapons. If it's nuclear weapons, well, there's North Korea preparing to start a nuclear weapons factory in North Korea. So we have to keep an eye on North Korea at the same time. We don't want to win it in Iraq and lose it in North Korea because we focused on Iraq. That wouldn't be much of a victory in terms of anti-proliferation. And then we got the other problems that are there. We said we were going to do something about terrorism. So we don't want to go into Iraq and have that become a source of so much hatred and animosity that it feeds the terrorist machine. So we've got to go in decisively. We've got to go in without causing a lot of civilian casualties. And we've got to go in a way that doesn't arouse any more resentment in the Arab world than is out there. And then we've got to have a post-war strategy. And it's just a daunting series of objectives. It's much more than simply fighting against Saddam's military. So for all the B-2s and cruise missiles and tanks and all the action that we're going to see on television, the real struggle here is afterwards.
Okay, General Clark, we'll take a quick break. We'll be back in just a minute. The deadline is approaching. The ships, planes, and tanks are ready. Will the weather be a factor? We'll find out if more sandstorms are in the forecast. Then we'll consider the troops you never see in action, except in training videos like these. We'll be joined by a former member of our Special Operations Forces. We'll also check back in with Wolf Blitzer for the latest from Kuwait City. We'll be right back.
Yellow pencils, yellow Post-it notes, yellow boxers, yellow boxers.
$14.
Land career, air career, pedicure, reader.
$137.
2 printers, 2 scanners, 2 tutus.
$540. Keeping business expenses separate from personal expenses? Priceless.
Letterhead, cinnamon bread, envelope.
There are some things money can't buy. For everything business, there's MasterCard Business Card.
Baymont Inns and Suites. Worth checking into.
This is to confirm an Etruscan chamber mud treatment.
3 o'clock is fine for her portrait sitting. She will take her breakfast on the veranda.
Cadota figs.
Brioche.
Scottish kippers and a steamed potato. Do not remove Master Davy's comic books from nightstand.
Confirming 1 poolside massage for Miss Beckett.
Please reserve an in-cabin babysitter for the Patterson Suite.
For 1 week, for 2 weeks, for 3 if you choose. You can be treated famously aboard one of our cruises. For more information, call your travel agent or log on.
If there is anything you need.
Anything at all.
Next on CNN, join Connie as the clock strikes the deadline and time runs out for Saddam.
Each passing hour, it seems like the anti-war rhetoric turns just a bit more desperate. This afternoon, in a satellite hookup with anti-war members of the European Parliament, some bold charges by a few congressional Democrats.
The President of the United States is essentially breaking the law.
That's Jim McDermott of Washington State, who last year came under fire for going to Iraq and criticizing the president from Baghdad. McDermott says the Bush administration has been using the media to deceive the American people into supporting what he calls an unjust war.
We have not seen a propaganda campaign in the world like this for about 70 years. This government has controlled the media, and it does not allow a voice to be raised.
Others who took part in the teleconference were Dennis Kucinich, a long-shot presidential candidate, and Ohio Congresswoman Marcy Kaptur, who's also taken some heat for comparing Osama bin Laden to the revolutionaries who founded this country. About 60% of House Democrats voted against war back in October. Only a handful of Senate Democrats were opposed. The truth is, with that vote, Congress pretty much took themselves out of the game back then. Legally, lawmakers have already given the president all the domestic authority that he needs for the international and to wage war. As for the international community, the Bush administration has consistently pointed out that while the UN is not backing the war, the Bush administration points out consistently that they've got at least 30 nations that are behind it. Shep.
Carl Cameron live on Capitol Hill. Our pre-war coverage continues in just a moment, but first some of the other news from across America. Washington, an angry farmer ending his standoff with police 2 days after it started in the nation's capital. Dwight Watson leaving with his hands in the air the tractor he drove into a pond near the National Mall. He claimed to have explosives, but the FBI refusing to say whether they found any in the tractor. Utah, the man and woman accused of kidnapping Elizabeth Smart making their first court appearances. Brian Mitchell and Wanda Barzee charged with kidnapping, sexual assault, and burglary. The Smart family saying they'd rather not have Elizabeth testify, but they're willing to do whatever it takes to see the suspects receive the proper punishment. Washington, the Senate rejecting the president's plan to open for oil drilling the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. The millions of barrels beneath the coastal plain are considered a key part of the White House's energy agenda. Environmentalists argue drilling would threaten the pristine area. Colorado, a massive blizzard dumping as much as 6 feet of snow in the Rockies. The storm shutting down just about everything in parts of Colorado and Wyoming. In Denver, 2 feet of snow, a record. And that's a Fox Watch. Across America. A dilemma for American troops when the war in Iraq begins. If they use tear gas, they'd be breaking international law, and if they don't, more lives could be at risk. The Army's 3rd Infantry Division, now taking up attack positions on the Iraqi border, will take you to the desert as the 3rd herd gets ready to roll. In one American town, 2/3 of the people have ties to the United States military. 2/3 of them. People there showing their support for our brave men and women overseas, as Fox reports tonight. And it is quite possible that within a matter of days or weeks, but most likely no more, a general will sit on a tank in downtown Baghdad, and the people of Iraq will be liberated.
Fully complying and helping the inspectors get their bags packed and evacuate Baghdad. For in the very end, Saddam still not fully complying with Resolution 1441. Blix telling the Security Council that progress was very limited in the last few weeks. He made the remarks during a meeting of the foreign ministers at the Security Council, and predictably, there were declarations both for and against military action. Russia, France, Germany saying action is not justified. Others, including Britain, saying it was Saddam Hussein's fault. But also noticeably absent from the gathering, Secretary of State Colin Powell and British Foreign Secretary Jack Straw. They both were not at the meeting. Their seats represented by their ambassadors. Powell saying he wasn't boycotting the meeting, but it was seen as a huge snub, exposing the deep split in the Security Council and the irrelevance of that body on Iraq at this moment. Then there was the turn of France. Its Foreign Minister, Dominique de Villepin, defending his country on the criticism, saying he's been shocked and hurt at all the criticism of his country as he defended his nation's honor.
I believe this kind of criticism that we've seen in the last days is absolutely unfair. I don't think we should look for scapegoats in this matter. It is clear for everybody. It is clear in the Council, it is clear outside the Council that we have different positions.
And tonight, one Security Council ambassador told me that he hopes Saddam's fate will be the same as Nicolas Ceausescu, the deposed leader of Romania. Back in 1989, Ceausescu and his wife were both deposed. They were then shot to death by their own people. Shepard.
Eric Shawn reporting live tonight from the United Nations. A few hundred demonstrators in Moscow marching against a likely war in Iraq, some of them blaming President Bush for the showdown. Iraq's ambassador to Moscow also taking part and warning that millions of Muslims around the world might go to war in support of Iraq. The Russian government claiming there is no proof that Saddam poses any threat to the United States. Military towns across the nation preparing for war and supporting the troops. 2 out of every 3 people in the town of Oak Harbor, Washington, have ties to the armed forces. The place is home to Whidbey Island Naval Air Station, where the radar-jamming Prowler Squadron is based. The owner of the local drive-in making a 40-foot Support the Troops banner to hang on the giant screen. Coalition forces could also be fighting environmental terrorism, and the USS Comstock will likely take part in that battle. The Navy supply ship now patrolling the Gulf in case Saddam decides to sabotage his own oil wells and causes a major spill.
This is the first time in history that there have been oil spill response resources in a war environment that are prepared to respond to an oil spill.
The ship carries a mixed crew from the Navy and Coast Guard, as well as 17 civilian contractors who run the oil skimming equipment. Speaking of oil, world oil prices continuing their slide today. The cost of a barrel of crude down more than 20% over the past 5 days, its lowest level in about 2 months. Analysts say they believe the market has pretty much stabilized until war in Iraq begins. Barry Diller has resigned as the chief executive of Vivendi Universal Entertainment. He says he wants to get out of the way while the French parent company tries to sell assets, including Universal Studios. Vivendi's billions in debt, and last year nearly filed for bankruptcy. If United Airlines is successful using bankruptcy to cut labor costs, it could pressure American Airlines to do the same thing. That according to a spokesman from American, the world's largest carrier, asking its unions for $2 billion in yearly labor cuts. The Blue Chips today extending their winning streak to 6 sessions. Haven't seen anything like this since the year 2000. Investors once again betting on a quick end to the war in Iraq, tech stocks falling after Oracle reported weaker than expected software sales, so the NASDAQ dipping, but just 3 points on the close. NASDAQ off 3 to 1397, and the Dow gaining 71 points. Now the Dow at 8265. With war all but imminent and the nation on high alert, the Fed's taking steps to protect high-profile spots. For example, flight restrictions over Disneyland in California and Walt Disney World and other attractions in Central Florida. Schools in the nation's capital putting students through a modern-day duck and cover. But not all terror preparations are this obvious. A Fox report now from Allison Camerata live in Boston tonight. Hello, Allison.
Hey, Shepard. Every major city, Boston included, is ramping up its security level. Some of the measures being taken are obvious, some are more subtle. For starters here, Massachusetts Governor Mitt Romney this week increased the number of state police and National Guardsmen in various hotspots. Boston is home to many historic landmarks like Faneuil Hall, Quincy Market, the Bunker Hill Monument, the USS Constitution, and more. Part of the challenge is to have the police presence be visible enough to make tourists feel safe, but not so intimidating that they're scared away. One of the places where the increased security is most obvious is Logan Airport. Everyone remembers that was the launching point for 2 of the 4 hijacked planes on September 11th. Today, security there is higher than ever. State troopers are outside randomly searching cars and questioning drivers. Inside, there are more officers and canine units on duty. All of the waterways around Boston are flooded with security patrol boats, the Coast Guard and state police doing round-the-clock monitoring of Boston Harbor. But authorities are not just concerned about places, they're also worried about events. The NCAA basketball tournament is scheduled to be played here in Boston this weekend. Organizers considered postponing or even canceling the games, but the Office of Homeland Security told them to proceed as planned. Obviously, security will be very tight. Shepard?
Allison Camerata live tonight in Boston. As the feds take steps to protect potential targets, some Americans are now remembering terrorist attacks past and wondering about those which may come as repercussions for a war on Iraq. A look at the long history of terror attacks against the United States in a Fox report now from Anita Vogel, who's live tonight on our West Coast newsroom. Anita?
Well, Shep, we are on heightened alert here in the U.S. as intelligence officials are warning that militant groups like Hamas might target Americans both overseas and here at home once war begins. But we also have to remember that Americans have always been a target for terrorists, even long since before September 11th. For example, back in 1979, Islamic fundamentalists led by Ayatollah Khomeini seized control of the American embassy in Tehran and took 66 Americans hostage. They were held for 14 months before they were released. In 1986, terrorists operating out of Libya detonated bombs in Rome, Vienna, and a West Berlin nightclub, killing 14 Americans, including 2 servicemen. And of course, in 1993, terrorists with ties to Osama bin Laden planted a car bomb in the World Trade Center. It exploded, killing 6 people. Intelligence experts say the truth is terrorism has been a part of our lives for a long time.
The consequences of inaction we saw on September the 11th. We had done nothing against Muslim fundamentalists for decades, and it came to roost in New York City. Of course, they accomplished more than they thought they would, but if you don't do anything, sooner or later, we're going to take it from Iraq.
And there have been many other acts of terrorism since September 11th. But in response to new potential threats, security is being tightened across the country, from government buildings and landmarks to Major League Baseball and the Academy Awards. Shep, back to you.
Anita Vogel, live in Los Angeles.
Coming up.
The 3rd Infantry Division braving a sandstorm as it gets ready for possible combat. Our soldiers setting up headquarters in the desert and waiting for the order to roll. We'll get a report from our man with the 3rd Division. The Israelis are not going to war, but they're getting ready anyway, remembering what happened the last time coalition forces went after Iraq. And Saddam Hussein now running out of time. The president's deadline just 19 minutes away. We're live from Iraq as Fox reports tonight.
Stay the course. Keep your focus.
Self a front row seat. Let's meet and have a ball. Let's live. Yeah, let's live for the wonder of it all. Meet me at Foxwoods.
All Almost full circle. It's U.S. troops now on the move in Kuwait. Of course, it was Iraq's invasion of Kuwait in 1990 that brought us to where we are tonight, looking at a live image from Baghdad, watching the countdown to a deadline. Civilians there know the cost of war. Many of them are leaving. Some who are staying are taking precautions. Don Teague is in Kuwait City with more.
Good evening, Lester. The sandstorm that blew through Kuwait last night and this morning has mostly passed, but the overwhelming feeling here tonight is that the major storm is still to come. All of a sudden, the most popular activity in Kuwait is leaving. In the northern Kuwaiti desert, tens of thousands of American troops spent today on the move, massing on the border with Iraq, poised for war at a moment's notice. With war thought to be just hours away, troops aren't the only ones planning to leave. Kuwait's airport was packed today. American and other expatriates and Kuwaitis who figure it's best to be somewhere else when hostilities kick off.
Due to the current situation, we are a little bit worried about little kids and the children. That's why I'm sending them to Cairo.
But most civilians in Kuwait are planning to stay put, hoping Saddam Hussein won't or can't attack this country with chemical weapons, some taking precautions just in case.
Actually, I'm taping this just in case there's a war, and this war could be used as chemical or biological, things like that,
So the U.S.-led attack against Iraq could come at any moment now, but the overwhelming feeling from people living here in Kuwait for the most part is, let's get it over with. They feel that this attack, this war with Iraq is a necessary step and the next step to a safer Middle East. Lester, back to you.
Don Teague, thanks. The right of your screen, the live picture of Baghdad. It could alight with the sound and the pictures of explosions of American warplanes. The air war will then be on. To give us some sense of what that will be like and the coordination of that many planes in the sky, we're joined now by retired Lieutenant General Michael Short and an MSNBC analyst. General, thanks for coming on tonight.
Lester, good to be here.
Give us a sense of what it's like to get that many planes to the targets at the exact moment. What's it like in the skies?
This is quite frankly, Lester, this is a real orchestration challenge. I face the same thing in Kosovo. We want everybody to get there at the same time. You've got bombers coming from as far away as Diego Garcia and the United Kingdom, B-52s and B-2s. You've got fighters coming off the decks of 6 carriers, 5 U.S. and 1 British carrier, and then land-based air, probably attack helicopters. They've all got to get in through Kuwait, a very narrow entrance area, and then spread out to their targets, and they've all got to be on time. Weather can cause you problems. Problems with your refueling tankers can cause you delays, and someone's got to manage all that. And there's an enormous staff at Prince Sultan Air Base in Saudi Arabia supporting Lieutenant General Buzz Mosley, whose job it is to do exactly that. But this is not easy. It will look easy on television, but it's real tough out there on the floor of the Combined Air Operations Center.
And you mentioned timing, and we just saw a picture of the B-2 stealth bomber. Of course, there's the F-117. These are the planes that will sneak in. Does everything work against them once they strike? Then, of course, there's no more surprise, and everything then follows?
Lester, I think you'll see the Tomahawk land attack missile launched by ships and the air launch cruise missile that comes off of the B-52 be the first explosions that occur in Baghdad and the Baghdad area, because we'll want to take down some radars. Although we're sending in stealth assets, as we found in Kosovo on the 4th night of the war, these airplanes are not invisible. So they are stealthy, but we'd like to bring down some radars that might be a threat to them before we bring in the B-2 and the 117. So you'll see unmanned cruise missiles followed very closely by stealth assets, followed then by conventional assets.
Let's talk about what those pilots face, though, when they fly over Baghdad. We recall 12 years ago, a picture very much like the one we're looking at live now was just bright flashes from the anti-aircraft artillery. What is it like to encounter that as a pilot?
Well, just a quick story, Lester. Then in the stealth community, I used to fly 117s when I was a bit younger, and they tell the story about the 2 young captains going out to get in their 117s on the first night over Baghdad, and the one young captain turns to the other and says, "Boy, I sure hope this stealth stuff works," or words to that effect. It's a frightening experience to think about, but once you get at it, it's your business. You've done it many, many times. Your cockpit becomes your office if you're in the 117 or the B-2. You're focused on the photos of the target you've been given. You're focused on working your throttles so you're going to be exactly on time, because you don't want to be 30 seconds late or 30 seconds early, because that may put somebody else in jeopardy. So you're working very hard to acquire your target, be on time, get your bomb in the air, and guide it for the time of flight. And quite frankly, in the stealth business, you're not paying a lot of attention to the threats. You're focused on flying your route, being on time.
Well, wait a minute. You're telling me that some of these planes flying hours and hours to their target, and they've got to hit a window that's down to just a few seconds?
Absolutely, Lester. If you can't make your TOT plus or minus 15 seconds in this fight, you shouldn't be in the game. These are the very best that we've got in this business. They have practiced in many different areas and many different venues to be exactly on time, and they will do that. It's very important to General Mosley and to General Franks that we strike targets in an orchestrated, simultaneous or sequential fashion, and timing is the way we do that.
General Short, fascinating stuff. Thanks for joining us tonight. We will be talking to you in the days to come.
Take care, Lester.
In Tel Aviv, Israel's armed forces are preparing for the worst, and citizens are stocking up. Countdown's Keith Miller has his report.
Good evening, Lester. The Israeli Home Front Command says the next 48 hours are critical in the coming confrontation with Iraq. But even that warning is not causing jitters here. 84% of the population is staying put, despite the danger of an Iraqi missile attack. The show will go on, war or no war with Iraq. Rehearsals for the Israeli Philharmonic continue, even though the schedule of concerts could coincide with conflict.
As far as we know, everything is going on as planned.
Preparation here is a way of life. Every man, woman, and child in the country ready. More than 6 million gas masks, miles of masking tape, tons of plastic sheeting, and lots of lace.
The chuppah.
Yes, lace. Hila Blick is getting a final fitting for her wedding dress, her big event, just weeks away.
The world come and they go to the wedding anyway.
Here in Tel Aviv, they're called bomb shelter brides. And boutique owner Riva Shmira has her own prenuptial precautions. She's installed a bomb shelter, so work on gowns can continue even during an attack.
I have our shelter downstairs, I have my machines downstairs, I have my workers.
This is your storeroom down here.
That's the studio.
The shelter is stocked with food and water and sewing machine. From the moment the sirens go off, how much time do you have to get down here?
It took us, we make a training for it, and it took us 30 seconds.
They want everything to be sweet. That's all what they wish. Everything to be very, very sweet.
The same mood can be seen in restaurants and bars. People here claim they can cope with the threat.
I think that's a surface kind of attitude. And once the first siren, I'm not even saying the first missile, but the first siren hits the sky, I think people are going to change their entire physiology, not just their psychology.
In fact, just the fear of what can happen can cause casualties. During the Gulf War in 1991, Iraq fired 39 Scud missiles at Israel. Only one person died from a direct hit. Another 94 died from heart attacks, strokes, and suffocation. The advice from medical experts is learn to live with the danger. Families are sealing rooms in case of chemical attack. There's a run on water, food, and batteries at the supermarket. The military raised its level of alert overnight. Fighter aircraft are now on 24-hour patrol. The Israeli Arrow anti-missile system armed to intercept any Iraqi Scuds. And American Patriot anti-missile batteries located at all major population centers. The government continues to assure the population here that the chances of a missile attack are low. Still, the military will be at maximum readiness before the deadline expires. Lester?
All right, Keith Miller, and about that deadline, 5 minutes, 3 seconds from 0 hour, the deadline for Saddam Hussein to leave quietly and his sons or be taken by force. That deadline's almost up. When we come back, we'll take you to the Iraqi capital and talk to one of a handful of reporters remaining in what could soon become a war zone. The countdown continues next hour after this.
future, everyone's glasses will automatically adjust to changing light and block out harmful UV rays that can damage the eyes. But for those with transitions lenses, the future is already here. Ask your eye care professional, because the danger is real now, and so is the protection. Transitions, right in any light.
Morning. Before we start, if everyone could move page 15 2 pages up in the deck. And if your page 5 is fuzzy, just pass it down.
Unprofessional documents.
Page 8.
Lead to messy meetings.
Just remove it.
But at Staples, you'll get professional quality copying and printing. Our certified associates and 3-step quality process make sure your job is done right.
And this goes up.
Quality copying and printing. Staples. That was easy.
If you've been investing in money funds, you've probably noticed your yields have slowed to a trickle. The strong, ultra-short-term income fund offers higher return potential and a 14-year history of proven performance. For an alternative to today's low yields, call 1-888-4STRONG. That's 1-888-4STRONG. We'll help you build a strong portfolio.
But I'll tell you, when you take a good close look at it, and you go into a place like Baghdad, and you look at the National Assembly building, the Ministry of Counsel, let's take a look at a presidential palace. We have got to find, we think, Saddam Hussein. And I would tell you that if the stories are correct and if the intelligence is correct, he is probably inside one of his bunkers 200 feet underneath the ground. If this was 20 years ago, we'd have to send in a bunch of these guys, special ops guys, to root him out. Very high-risk mission. We don't have to do that anymore. We've got a new device. It was just tested in Eglin. We fly in the MOAB, which really stands for Mother of All Bombs. Blow that up, and the effect that you get from that, Shepard, is an incredible overpressure that is going to go throughout this complex and find Mr. Saddam Hussein and possibly his sons Uday and soon-to-be Uday, and give them the mother of all sunburns. I would tell you that we will see an incredible amount of ordnance, things that we haven't seen in the past, very accurate weapons, very lethal. The MOAB is a daisy cutter on steroids, and Iraq is not prepared for what's going to be thrown at them.
Bob Bevilacqua live with us in Washington. Bob, thanks very much. So over the first 24 hours, as I was mentioning, a move from the south toward the north, a relentless bombing campaign to start it out with literally thousands of targets that have already been identified. Then a move from the north to the south and eventually surrounding the city of Baghdad. And then we find out whether the elite Republican Guard and the Special Republican Guard will in fact fight. That's what remains unknown as Fox reports tonight. There will be continuing coverage, of course, and the O'Reilly Factor is coming up next on Fox News Channel. But first, we have this. The deadline is now. 48 hours ago, President George W. Bush gave Iraqi leader Saddam Hussein an ultimatum: leave Iraq with your sons or face military conflict. Now at 8 p.m. in Washington, 4 a.m. in Baghdad, time has expired. Saddam Hussein says the administration has made his final mistake. War is imminent. The United States, the United Kingdom, and the coalition of the willing plan to disarm Iraq and cause regime change in its capital. It is a conflict set to begin at the time of the coalition's choosing, a moment believed to be hours or days from now. We've reached this point after a series of events since a ceasefire in the Persian Gulf War of 1991. In order...
Storm veteran retired General Barry McCaffrey will be here to offer his thoughts, and retired Admiral Dennis McGinn, the Pentagon's first Deputy Chief of Naval...
...never again invade neighboring countries or kill his own people. It is the conclusion of the American administration that the Iraqi regime did not and has not disarmed. Saddam Hussein is deemed by the White House a threat to American national security, a brutal, murderous dictator, and a menace to the world. It is the hope of the administration and the goal of the war planners that disarmament and regime change be accomplished as swiftly as practical with as little loss of life as possible. But in conflict, Americans, they warn, will die.
some number of our sons and daughters, our brothers and sisters, will give their lives for the cause of freedom. At home, with history as our guide and peace our prayer, we, the citizens of this nation, will no doubt rally round those putting willingly themselves in harm's way. Fox News is committed to bring you fair and balanced coverage of the events to come. The O'Reilly Factor is next. I'm Shepard Smith in New York. For all of us in the Fox News family, thank you for trusting us for your news. With the nation on high alert and our armed forces prepared for war, stay brave, stay aware.
Lincoln and Kitty Hawk in the Mediterranean.
Understand that because, as Tony Blair put it,
In the middle of a sandstorm, weather conditions will be a key factor as U.S. commanders advise President Bush on the timing of the invasion. 5 aircraft carrier battle groups are in position in the Persian Gulf, the Red Sea, and the Mediterranean. U.S. and British pilots blanketed southeastern Iraq today with almost 2 million leaflets instructing Iraqi soldiers on how to surrender.
And those leaflets are apparently beginning to pay off now. 17 Iraqi soldiers have surrendered to U.S. forces near the Kuwaiti border even before hostilities begin. Quiet. Shot.
Staff always dismissed us rudely. Now, to be fair, lots of folks are rude to us because we don't pander to anyone. But Daschle was outrageous in his accusations and intellectually dishonest as well. Now, the South Dakota senator finds himself in the same position as Trent Lott. His credibility is finished. As you may know, Daschle has criticized the war against Iraq, saying, quote, "This president failed so miserably in diplomacy that we are now forced to war." But in 1998, when President Clinton bombed Iraq, Daschle said this: "We have virtually exhausted our diplomatic effort to get the Iraqis to comply with their own agreements and with international law. Given that, we have got to force them to comply, and we are doing so militarily." So what's up with the hypocrisy, Senator? You were all for using force 5 years ago. Now, after 9/11, the threat from Saddam's weapons is even greater. What say you? The no-spin truth is Mr. Daschle's playing politics in a time of life and death, and that should be unacceptable to all Americans, not just Republicans. Senator Lott lost power because his credibility dissolved after he applauded a philosophy that hurt African Americans. Now Senator Daschle is embracing a philosophy that is inconsistent with his past positions, and it is not helpful at all in the war against Saddam. So Talking Points believes it is over for Tom Daschle, at least as far as his national influence is concerned. I also believe the good people of South Dakota need to take a hard look at this guy. And that's a memo. Now for the top story tonight, here's the latest out of Iraq. The 48-hour deadline for Saddam Hussein to get out of Baghdad has passed. He has ignored it. War could come at any time. Thousands of U.S. troops are near Kuwait's border with Iraq, just waiting for orders to cross. Meantime, U.S. jets have dropped bombs on several Iraqi artillery guns in southern Iraq. And 17 Iraqi soldiers have surrendered already to American GIs near the Kuwaiti border. If anything breaks during this hour, we will, of course, bring it to you immediately. Joining us now here in our D.C. studios, Fox News military analyst, Major General Paul Vallely, and in New York, Colonel David Hunt. Major General, you outranked the Colonel, so we'll begin with you.
Oh, it's not already. Okay, here we go.
You know what? You got to watch
Here we
yourself
go.
here. All right, nuts and bolts. All right, nuts and bolts. The order has already been given, you believe, to attack, correct?
I think so. Yes, Bill.
All right. And you were briefed today by very high-ranking military officials, correct?
That's correct.
All right. How does it go down from here?
Well, what happens, Bill, once the president gives the order to launch the military campaign, that then goes from the Pentagon, from the White House to the Pentagon, down to Central Command, and then, of course, over to Qatar, where the main headquarters is. Or it may go directly to Qatar from the Pentagon.
That's where General Tommy Franks
That's where General Franks is, and he's running the operation, just like General Schwarzkopf did
in the first
back in 1991.
So Franks has the discretion to launch when he feels the conditions are best.
That's correct. And what those conditions are, weather, what the enemy is doing, are the troops in the position to launch the attack. So all of those have to come together in the best possible way.
How do they communicate in Qatar with General Franks and his commanders on the Kuwaiti border?
Well, fortunately, with the satellites, Bill, today we can communicate wireless in many cases or secure landlines. So they have a variety of methods to communicate, even through the internet.
Primarily phone, correct?
Phone and even internet.
And it's okay, they have computers.
Sure,
and
absolutely,
like
that are basically classified.
So Franks doesn't have to go back to the Pentagon now. It's his call when they go.
Well, they're on the line all the time, and so he'll tell the president we're going to launch on such and such an hour. Maybe it's 1 o'clock this morning.
But
Maybe
he will
it's 2
tell the
o'clock.
president before he tells us.
Absolutely.
Okay. All
So that's what he has to do, is notify we're ready to go and we're launching at this time on this day.
All right. Now, obviously, the enemy can intercept cell phone calls and all of that. So the safer way is on the landline or
That's what we call secure transmission.
Okay. Now, Colonel, what are you hearing in New York among your sources?
Yeah, you had a bad little firefight in Basra with some special air service. British 22 SAS. They whacked a bunch of Iraqis there, probably killed about 10. And they were in there to help these great Marines and British soldiers that are going to hit to Basra. We also had the Air Force bombing today, some artillery pieces that will also could affect these great guys going for Basra. Also, we got a sandstorm problem, which is maybe why we didn't see bombs drop as soon as 8 o'clock tonight landed. The problem is, as the general can verify, talk to you about, is the fact you've got lasers can be affected somewhat by the sand. And again, it would attack when we're ready, when it's right for us, and all the pieces are lined up, because there's a big difference how we're going to do this from last time.
Isn't it better for the U.S. to maybe hold back for a day and just spook the Iraqis like crazy, because they're got to be jumpy? I mean, they're running across the border. Someone to surrender now.
Sure. The longer you wait, the problem is you're going to have more Iraqis coming across to give up. But we have a better plan. Yeah, absolutely. And that, the guys, smart guys are thinking just that way. Psychological operations people that are advising the general in Qatar and the people at the Department of Defense and tell people exactly that way. But my bet is after the president gave the okay to the general, you go when you want, that now they're playing that game. But I also think, as the general's already mentioned, that weather is one of the key factors, and I think the sandstorm thing is a problem.
Okay. Now, General, when it launches, all right, it's going to be simultaneous, correct? North, South, Basra, Air Force, Marines, boom.
That's right. That's right. Total joint force operation coming from many different directions, Bill. North, from the west, from the south, maybe two-pronged attack, what we call an axis of advance up from Saudi Arabia maybe, and Kuwait, and even from the Persian Gulf, where we have the Marines on those ships with helicopters. Yeah. Now, I think what they may do, there will be a northern front, Bill. There's no doubt about that. That was confirmed today. There will be a northern front. Yeah,
because Turkey's going to let them bring special commandos through. And
probably let some come in under the radar, use the bases. But the Marines have the capability, as well as the 101st, to air assault up there over land. And they can do that, of course, much more rapidly than the tanks or the mechanized division. So I think you'll see maybe some airborne operations, air assault very early on.
But all at once.
All at once.
All at once. Not like the first Gulf War, where there was the Air Force and everything.
That's right.
Now, Colonel, I want to show a picture, a live shot from Baghdad tonight. And not a lot of parties going on there, okay? The Associated Press reporting the city is a ghost town, that most people, it's a city of 5 million. Most of the citizens of Baghdad have gotten out of Dodge. They're gone. And this will make it a lot easier for coalition forces, correct?
Absolutely. What we're trying to do with this simultaneous attack that's been very well described already is avoid as much as we possibly can civilian casualties and hurting civilian buildings, even bridges. It's interesting you say, you know, they've abandoned the place, it looks at, but they leave the lights on, which is easier for us. This is not a smart guy that's running this from Baghdad. But yeah, this looks like everybody understands what's about to happen. And as you've already mentioned, maybe making them sweating them out a few more hours makes them make some more mistakes. And also on a simultaneous attack issue, I also think we got guys already in country, very close.
Yeah, we're going to. We don't want you to. We got a special forces guy coming up behind you, and he's going to tell us where they are and what they're doing.
Okay.
That is, of course, happening right now. Well, it looks like that. You know, the calm before the storm, obviously, and we're all praying that this goes the USA's way. But the orders have been kill Saddam or capture him.
Capture or kill. They really want to try him for war crimes.
Do they really? Where? In The Hague? Or?
Well, it could be, or even within Iraq itself. There's a couple options going around, but they're going to get him, and if he stays in Baghdad or Tikrit, we're going to have our Delta Force go in, our special ops, and they're going to do what they call a snatch operation. They're going to snatch him, grab him, and then they'll deal with him.
Well, I hope they slap the living daylights out of his sons before they do. All right, General.
Thanks,
Colonel, thanks very much. We'll be seeing you guys throughout our coverage. And next on the rundown, as we mentioned, U.S. Special Forces already engaged in combat. We'll tell you how. And then a call for Secretary of State Powell to resign. We'll tell you why. Right back as The Factor continues from D.C.
Talking Points is brought to you by Saturn, makers of the View, L-Series, and the all-new Ion.
You ranked Saturn #1 in customer satisfaction with dealer service and #1 in sales satisfaction. We'd like to return the favor.
Just an old-fashioned love song coming down in free.
Now get 0% APR financing for 5 full years on any 2003 Saturn. Come in soon. We can't wait to see you. Get a 2003 Saturn Ion L-Series or View at 0% APR financing for 5 years. For restrictions, see your retailer.
Someday, it all pays off. When you face the challenges and you've made the right moves. Through it all, Prudential Financial is there. Because when it comes to your financial security, having the right partner can mean everything. Prudential Financial, growing and protecting your wealth.
You watching this?
So, during my hospitalization, our company will be in the capable hands of Francis
Skip
Hancock III. Son?
I'm so stoked.
Dump it.
Sell it.
All of it.
Ever wonder how the world's largest brokerage houses can reach millions of their customers just when it matters most? They rely on the world's most capable networking company.
You're out. Great, thanks.
AT&T.
Why are there so many microphones?
Elias, I have to go back to my convention. Yeah, I know, but I have a convention. Bueno.
Come on.
I have to go to my convention. I know. I wish I could stay. We got married.
Than the soldiers whom they are accompanying in the field. It's risky for everyone here. It's risky for the Kuwaitis. It's risky for the Kurds in northern Iraq, for the journalists, because nobody knows what Saddam Hussein is going to do. Those of us who've watched him for a long time had a feeling of what he might have done before he understood that this really is the end game. So for us, for those who fancy themselves amateur psychologists, there's really very little way to read his intentions, and we know what he's capable of.
Can you describe this mission, exactly how it's going to work? How will they know what locations to go to?
Well, there's been years now of experience of identifying suspect sites. This was done by international inspectors, both UNSCOM, which was the first international inspection agency, and most recently by UNMOVIC. But on top of that, the administration itself has been collecting just a slew of information from defectors who have continued to come across the Iraqi border, from intelligence sources and methods, from satellites, from intercepts. You saw a little of this when Colin Powell made his impressive speech to the United Nations. So there's a lot of suspect sites. In fact, one person in Washington told me that the list could total more than 1,400 of these sites, which means that those people on the ground who are hunting for them may be very, very busy in the coming weeks and months.
Will the scientists actually be able to test the samples to see if they are biological or chemical weapons?
Well, one of the novel pieces of equipment that the administration is fielding during this campaign are 2 mobile labs that will actually be able to analyze and test the material that the scientists bring back with them from the field, and within just a few hours, actually less than 24 hours, be able to give the people on the ground an assessment of what that material is with a 90% degree of confidence. That's really amazingly good technology. So the administration has invested heavily in getting the technological base and infrastructure out there in the field so that it can quickly determine whether or not the scientists and the experts have actually found what they call a smoking gun.
Now, Judy, I understand that the Pentagon is so determined to find these weapons that it's really quite an ambitious effort, and they even believe that they can get to Iraqi scientists to question them about what is there.
Yes, the scientist, almost everyone believes, is going to be the key to finding weapons of mass destruction. It is the scientists and the military planners and Saddam's military people who know where this stuff was made, who know who participated in making it and who know where it may be being stored.
Judith Miller, thank you for your reporting.
Thanks very much, Connie. Good luck.
Now, ground troops, of course, are not the only ones who will be fighting this war. Tonight's CNN's Gary Stryker is in the Mediterranean on board the USS Theodore Roosevelt, which launched about 100 sorties a day against Iraq during the 1991 Gulf War, and is expected to launch some of the first strikes when the U.S. attacks Iraq. And he joins us now by phone. Gary, you just got out of a meeting with the commanders. What have they told you about a possible strike?
Well, Connie, they've told us that the situation here is actually business as usual. There's nothing unusual that's going on the ship, up on the flight deck. The squadrons are checking and rechecking aircraft. In about half an hour, they're going to start launching and recovering planes as usual. And everything here appears to us to be normal. They're loading dummy practice bombs, as well as live ordnance, as usual, and all of this could change, of course, they point out, if and when they get the instructions to launch attacks, Connie.
Now, we've been told that combat pilots have been asked to sleep during the day and stay awake during the night. That's a clear indication, though, that they're making preparations to make strikes during the evening.
Yes, it's not just the combat pilots, it's the entire ship, actually, that's now been converted to nighttime operations. And the purpose of this is to make sure that airstrikes, when they do take place, will be carried out in a continuous way. There are actually two aircraft carriers here in the Mediterranean, the Harry S. Truman as well as the Roosevelt. The Truman has stayed on daytime ops, and the Roosevelt is now on nighttime operations. We're eating breakfast at 6 p.m. and dinner at 6 a.m., and everyone's sort of walking around sort of zombified now, because this is the first day that we've actually done this, but in a day or so it'll seem normal. And the purpose of this is so that between the two battle groups, there are 8 squadrons of fighter jets on these two carriers. They'll be able to launch sorties 24 hours a day, morning, noon, and night, and that'll be a continuous round of attacks on Iraq when that begins, Connie.
Gary, I can't imagine. Now, I don't know how anyone can sleep, how anyone can eat. How is all of this affecting the troops? Are they fearful, or are they pumped?
They're pumped. They're armed and ready to go, as they say. We're
trying to block traffic.
By U.S. and coalition forces, that they can hold sidearms, but that all the other weapons must be put aside. In addition, CENTCOM went to the unusual step today of releasing some of its own video of F-117s taking off from a base in the Middle East. Clearly, Lester, part of the psychological operations to let the Iraqis know that war perhaps is imminent. Lester?
All right, David, thanks very much. We want to again update you on the breaking story out of Florida that we're reporting. A domestic airplane, a propeller Cuban domestic plane, was intercepted by U.S. fighter jets tonight. It's on the ground in Key West, Florida. The initial indications the plane had been hijacked. 35 people on board that airplane. Again, it's a domestic Cuban airliner. It's a World War II era DC-3, and now on the ground in Florida. We'll continue to bring developments on that story as we get them. Now back to the U.S. troops on the ground in Kuwait. Many of them appear to be taking up perhaps their launch positions for an invasion that could come at any time now that we're past the deadline. NBC's Chip Reed is with the 1st Marine Division and has more on what they're about right now.
In the Kuwait desert, an American armada of military power surging to the north through miles of open desert toward the border with Iraq. Convoys miles long and stretching to the horizon of tanks and armored assault vehicles, bristling with heavy weapons, and thousands of warriors from the 1st Marine Division moving into position, ready to attack.
They train to win a battle.
Lieutenant Michael Prado says he's ready to lead his platoon into the face of the enemy.
They train to kill and to win, and that's all they do. I mean, there's no roundabout way of saying that.
Move it out, move it out! After weeks of arduous desert training, 3rd Battalion Executive Officer Kevin Nave says the troops are primed.
We will use all of our skill and all of the tools of our trade to take the fight to the enemy.
An enemy that most here believe will be quickly and devastatingly defeated. But for now, these Marines must do what they find most difficult of all: dig in and wait for the order to go in. Until then, they will live in these holes in the hard desert sand.
And that's my bed.
This is where they will eat, grab what little sleep they can, and endure the windstorms that are the constant curse of desert life, all the while hoping they will soon escape this place and cross the border into Iraq.
It's just one step closer to going home, and we're just ready to go in. We're tired of waiting.
Waiting for an order that most here believe is only days or hours away. Chip Reed, NBC News, Northern Kuwait.
And it is now Thursday morning in Baghdad. It is past the deadline that President Bush laid down 2 days ago. Ari Fleischer, the White House press secretary, has told reporters that the president will launch this war on a time of his choosing, as he said 2 nights ago. Also, we've learned that CIA Director Tenet says that Saddam Hussein is still in Iraq and did not leave before the deadline. Ari Fleischer asked tonight what the president's mood is. He said, quote, "The American people are ready to disarm Saddam Hussein. They know what is at stake and that the military is ready." And Baghdad and the rest of the world on edge tonight, waiting for this war to begin. Now, the U.S. Army's soldiers, its machines, are locked. They're loaded. They're waiting for the order that will send them into combat now. Let's continue our roll call with our correspondents in the field with the troops. The Countdown's David Bloom on the telephone now with the latest from northern Kuwait.
Tonight I'm with the lead elements of the U.S. Army's 3rd Infantry Division, and we are literally right at the Kuwaiti-Iraqi border. The soldiers here are in what they call blackout mode, meaning no lights, minimal noise, no non-secure communications. We are, in fact, so close to the Iraqi border that a number of Iraqi soldiers have already reportedly surrendered today to not only Kuwaiti border guards, but also to American forces here. Some others, we're told, have been turned away because the Kuwaiti government does not want large numbers of Iraqi soldiers surrendering in Kuwait. They're being told to wait until hostilities commence and then surrender to American authorities in Iraq itself. As to the U.S. forces here, they're certainly very vigilant. They're in defensive positions. They're big guns pointed outward with the tanks and the Bradleys, awaiting the orders from the president. There's certainly a gung-ho spirit, if you will. They're ready to cross this border and head north. Their commanders have expressed some concern that if they wait too long, Saddam Hussein might be tempted to launch some sort of preemptive strike against these forces arrayed in northern Kuwait, either with artillery strikes or with chemical munitions. So there's certainly a heightened degree of vigilance tonight, but no indication so far that the ground war will begin this evening.
That's David Bloom on the phone earlier from northern Kuwait. U.S. tanks, of course, on the border with Iraq tonight in that DMZ. And the question is, what might we expect in the ground phase of a war? What might they expect? And joining me live to talk about all that from New York, retired U.S. Army General Barry McCaffrey. General, good evening to you.
Hi, Lester.
Let me first begin with those airstrikes in the southern no-fly zone today, apparently taking out things that could endanger those troops along the DMZ. Artillery. Was that a move that you would have expected?
Yeah, the prime threat to U.S. forces is always enemy artillery and rockets, so we always try and follow where they are. They're the first priority for air and ground attack. In this case, of course, these units are capable of employing chemical munitions. I'm not sure they knew they had chemical munitions, but it was a clear and present threat, and so they went after them.
I know tanks are what you were all about in the last Gulf War. They've moved them up apparently into this DMZ here. Does that put them in a vulnerable state when we get into this so-called pre-attack or jump-off point?
I'll tell you, Lester, trying to damage a tank mechanized unit is pretty tough to do. That M1 tank does 50 miles an hour. From the front quadrant, Lester, almost nothing in the Iraqi inventory except an aircraft bomb can go through the armor. And the Bradley fighting vehicle is another speed demon with a 25mm cannon on it and tow missiles that'll go out a couple of thousand meters or more and kill any Iraqi tank in the force.
And we know the Iraqis are using tanks from the Soviet era, the same ones the U.S. was trained to fight during the Cold War. Tell me about what they have. Is it the T-80, the T-76,
Well, the centerpiece of their most advanced armor is a T-72 M1 tank. It fires a smoothbore 120-millimeter gun. It's a good piece of equipment except when a U.S. tank hits it, in which case the whole thing comes apart. The ammunition, the fuel are co-located. They're both in a turret. When we hit those things, the turret would fly up 100 meters in the air, obviously killing the crew instantaneously.
What about their training in terms of, I know that tanks work in tandem with other tanks. How is their training, especially post-Gulf War?
It is miserable. Their maintenance is terrible. You know, the deal about tank and mechanized infantry warfare is if you buy this equipment and you don't train to use it, it's worthless. And unfortunately, fortunately for us, their tank and mechanized infantry crews can move around on the battlefield, can fire their weapons, but they are not the kind of team that we develop at our National Training Center out in the Mojave Desert in California.
What are your thoughts about the psychological warfare campaign that's going on, and even the leaflets telling these guys, get out of your tank, but first turn the turret around, give us some sign that you're not going to fight? When you heard that 17 Iraqis have already come across the border, did that give you a sense this may be easier than some imagine?
Well, again, remember, we're worried about 60,000 to 80,000 Republican guards, the 3 tank divisions around Baghdad. We're worried about 15,000 special Republican guard in presidential sites and in military installations. But these 3 divisions on the border probably are going to give up. These poor kids have had it. They don't want to die for Saddam. They're miserably trained and led. They won't fight.
All right, General Barry McCaffrey, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Let's talk about what's going on in Turkey. Of course, the U.S. for much of the last several weeks and months has been trying to secure the use of Turkey as a ground base. Haven't got that. Now there's a chance that they could get at least the airspace, which could have an effect on the $15 billion aid package to Turkey. Hoda Kotb is near Incirlik Air Base in Turkey to bring us up to speed.
Lester, the U.S. cannot be very happy with the latest proposal by the new prime minister. It would allow for the use of Turkish airspace and not the Turkish air base. The U.S. was counting on that air base because they have F-16s and F-15s lined up and at the ready. Those planes have been patrolling the no-fly zone, but they need specific parliament approval here in Turkey to take place in the Iraqi offensive. The alternative for the U.S. is to use the aircraft carriers in the Mediterranean Sea off the coast of Turkey, the USS Harry Truman and the USS Theodore Roosevelt. This would be a very scaled-down version of the northern attack that the U.S. wants. The vote again on airspace will take place tomorrow. Now, what the U.S. wants is the use of the airspace, the air base, and to bring in 62,000 ground troops. There is some pressure on Turkey to push that through because a huge U.S. aid package is attached to that, somewhere between $15 and $30 billion. But again, on the table tonight is strictly the airspace over Turkey. A vote will come tomorrow. Lester?
Hoda Kotb with our report there. Let's update the breaking story regarding the apparent hijacking of a plane intercepted by U.S. fighters tonight and now on the ground in Key West. That plane, a Cuban domestic airliner, and the latest report we have is 6 people on the plane were taken away in handcuffs. The rest of the people are now off the airplane. All appears to have ended peacefully, and I say an apparent hijacking. It's not clear. A pair of F-15s were scrambled out of Homestead Air Force Base in Florida to intercept this plane. It was a very old airplane, a DC-3, which is a civilian follow-on of a venerable World War II transport. But again, the plane on the ground in Key West, 6 people in handcuffs. Let's continue our reporting now on this night in which the world waits for war. Tel Aviv, of course, is a city on edge as well. It suffered certainly greatly in the last Gulf War. Charles Sabine talks about how folks there are getting ready for attack.
Lester, it's the middle of the night here and the streets of Tel Aviv are unusually quiet. Earlier, though, we had the sight of citizens carrying their gas masks with them in cardboard boxes after they were told to do so by the Home Front command here. That is the final level of preparation for civilians here for war. It signifies that the government believes it could be only a matter of hours, not days away. Prime Minister Ariel Sharon has been briefed by President Bush in the last 36 hours, but he knows this time Israel will not get as much war warning as it did in the 1991 Gulf War. There is, though, still cooperation between the two countries. U.S. Patriots are stationed just a couple of miles south of here, and this time Israeli army officers will be able to see real-time images of the battlefield in Iraq, giving them warning of any launches of Scud missiles. If those are dispatched, sirens will be heard here, and people will have less than 6 minutes to get to a shelter or a sealed room. One other difference, Lester, with the last Gulf War: if this country does suffer a major attack, it has made it very clear that, unlike 1991, it will respond in force. Lester.
Charles Sabine in Tel Aviv for us tonight. Charles, thanks.
Thanks.
Let's go around the U.S. right now and check in at military bases nationwide where still troops are awaiting marching orders. Let's begin at Fort Benning, Georgia. NBC's Ron Blum with our story.
Good evening, Lester, from Fort Benning, Georgia in Columbus, Georgia. That same apprehension that's across the country is here as we wait for a conflict to begin, and for good reason. Several thousand members of the 3rd Infantry who deployed in January to Kuwait massed along the Iraqi border. Then there's the Army Ranger program. They all come through here on training, as do the paratroopers. So many families, many people here have ties to the servicemen who are deployed overseas for this pending conflict. Now to my colleague Benno Schmidt at Fort Stewart, Georgia.
Ron, thank you. As you would expect here from Fort Stewart, Georgia, the expectations, the sense of patriotism very high. This, the largest Army base east of the Mississippi. Some of the tanks you see here alongside me are long retired, but this is the home of the 3rd Infantry Mechanized Division, what one military expert calls the tip of the spear of any land invasion in Iraq. So overwhelming patriotism and a sense of expectation here. From here, let's go to my colleague Jim Cummins. He is at Barksdale Air Force Base in Louisiana. Jim?
Thank you, Benno. Here at Barksdale Air Force Base, home of the B-52 bombers, families and loved ones are on edge as those bombers will see action in the first hours of Operation Enduring Freedom. And we will stand by down here for the next 24 hours talking to those families and bringing you their stories during the first hours of this war. Back to you, Lester.
All right, thanks to all of you still coming your way on the countdown on the brink. Now the deadline has passed for Saddam Hussein to leave Iraq. We're waiting to see when and how military action will commence. Another report from the front lines just ahead here on the countdown. Plus another military briefing ahead while we keep an eye on Baghdad, where bombs could begin raining down at any time. Countdown Iraq. We'll be right back.
The missions protecting bridges. Going from Kuwait to Baghdad, there are some 50 to 60 bridges. Many of those bridges will have to remain intact if an American armored force is to move fast to Baghdad. That's a Special Forces mission. Also, protecting dams. There are 5 or 6 dams on the Tigris and Euphrates River that if Saddam Hussein uses water as a weapon, he will blow those dams, flooding the Mesopotamian plain, making it very hard for tank brigades, tank battalions, and divisions to move north to Baghdad with any speed. Tonight, as we came to this small studio we've set up very close to the front lines, you could see the Kurds who live in this area leaving the cities, setting up campfires, setting up tents. It is nighttime here, and like everyone else around here, those Kurds are waiting for war. We are waiting for war.
Fred Francis in northern Iraq, thank you very much. And so it is a world on edge, and sometimes the unknown can be the most frightening, the most anxiety providing moment. You're looking at Baghdad on the right of your screen. There is the White House on the left side of your screen. Some activity there tonight, we are told. But not a very restless night in Baghdad, where the sun will soon come up and the specter of war continues to hang over Iraq. We'll keep you posted. Keep it right here on MSNBC. I'm Lester Holt. Thanks for watching Countdown Iraq. Hardball's next.
I'm Chris Matthews. Let's play hardball. The big story tonight, countdown to war. 1 hour past the U.S. deadline for Saddam Hussein to leave Iraq. American troops are poised on the Kuwait-Iraq border and ready to invade. You're looking at a picture of downtown Baghdad right now, which we will continue to monitor throughout the hour. Earlier today, U.S. warplanes bombed Iraqi artillery and short-range missiles in the southern no-fly zone, and 17 Iraqi soldiers laid down their arms and crossed the border into Kuwait. NBC News correspondent Campbell Brown is at the White House. Campbell, thanks for joining us. What is the latest in terms of the word from the president?
Well, in terms of timing, we're being told tonight to, quote, be flexible. As you can imagine, most of the White House reporters are still here at the White House. We're getting some briefings that are going on later into the evening. The president right now is in the residence with the First Lady. He spoke a few minutes ago on the phone with his chief of staff, Andy Card, about the intelligence situation, what he was hearing from George Tenet about what may be going on the ground, whether or not there was any evidence at all that Saddam may have in fact left Iraq. There is none. And the way the White House is framing this is saying it is Saddam's final act of defiance. Other than that, it's frankly very quiet because officials say all the decisions have been made. At this point, as one official put it, this is in the general's hands now, meaning it's up to them to make the determination about timing based on whether daylight, nighttime versus, all of those various factors, and the president has turned that decision-making over to them.
So the system right now is for the president to await a proposed time from his top military, approve that, and then they go.
Yes, but that proposed time may have already been presented and approved. We're getting signals tonight to be flexible. That our sense is it could come with in the next 24 hours, but there is a lot of speculating going on. No one really knows for sure except the people in the building.
Let's talk about the fact that for the first time the president and the White House rather have been talking about casualties. Is this to inoculate the public against the obvious that people are going to get killed in this war?
Yeah, and I think that's something you're going to hear more from the president on when he gives the Oval Office address. We're told that he will speak again to the American people after the bombs begin to fall. And we're being told that it'll be similar to Afghanistan. If you remember when the strikes began in Afghanistan, they started around noontime on a Sunday. About an hour later, the president came out and addressed that issue and warned people that there would be sacrifice, that American lives will probably be lost. In this case, it's a lot harder to do because officials are very upfront about the fact that this is going to be a much more conventional war and also a much more dangerous war.
Right. Is the president actually concerned, or his people concerned, that this continuing political debate, which certainly has continued through today from Capitol Hill with Democrats criticizing the president's handling of diplomacy up to this point, is he concerned, or is it just partisan? That he's worried that, is he actually worried it may affect public feeling towards this war, morale, national morale?
No. I think the White House feels that the moment the bombs begin to fall, you're going to see the poll numbers shoot through the roof. The American public, as traditionally they do, rallies behind the president in times of war. And in fact, I wouldn't say the president himself, but some of his more political strategists have been enjoying this, saying that they believe Democrats are shooting themselves in the foot, if you will, by going on the attack so close to war. And even now you're hearing some of the Democratic presidential candidates come out and say publicly that they intend to tone down the rhetoric. Even those who are opposed to the war say that once it begins, they don't feel it's appropriate to speak out against it. And so I think the White House, if anything, thinks they're benefiting from this.
I think they are too. Thank you very much. Campbell Brown at the White House. In the Persian Gulf, U.S. forces have taken up positions along the DMZ between Kuwait and Iraq. NBC's Chip Reed is with the Marines and has this report.
In the Kuwait desert, an American armada of military power surging to the north through miles of open desert toward the border with Iraq. Convoys miles long and stretching to the horizon of tanks and armored assault vehicles, bristling with heavy weapons and thousands of warriors from the 1st Marine Division moving into position, ready to attack.
They train to win a battle.
Lieutenant Michael Prado says he's ready to lead his platoon into the face of the enemy.
They train to kill and to win, and that's all they do. I mean, there's no roundabout way of saying that.
Move it out, move it out! After weeks of arduous desert training, 3rd Battalion Executive Officer Kevin Nave says the troops are primed.
We will use all of our skill and all of the tools of our trade to take the fight to the enemy.
An enemy that most here believe will be quickly and devastatingly defeated. But for now, these Marines must do what they find most difficult of all: dig in and wait for the order to go in. Until then, they will live in these holes in the hard desert sand.
And that's my bed.
This is where they will eat, grab what little sleep they can, and endure the windstorms that are the constant curse of desert life, all the while hoping they will soon escape this place and cross the border into Iraq.
It's just one step closer to going home, and we're just ready to go in. We're tired of waiting.
waiting for an order that most here believe is only days or hours away. Chip Reed, NBC News, Northern Kuwait.
For more on the war preparations, hardball correspondent David Schuster is at Central Command in Qatar. You're there with Tommy Franks in the Central Command. David, it's good to see you over there. Let me ask you about the timing. You said to me a while ago that the most dangerous time for the service people is right now. Tell me about it.
Well, Chris, the problem that they have, or the fear that they have, rather, is that you have all these U.S. troops that are essentially concentrated in a pretty small area when you look at the larger landscape of Iraq. You've got a lot of troops, 280,000 coalition troops, mostly in Kuwait. There had been some fear that once Saddam knew that the coalition was coming after him, that might be Saddam's preemptive moment when he might try to unleash whatever chemical and biological weapons he has and take out as many coalition troops as he can before they cross into Iraq. So with each passing hour that does not happen, clearly commanders here and, of course, also at the Pentagon are somewhat relieved.
Let's talk about the next stage. It's called shock and awe. What's that tell you? What's that going to be like?
Shock and awe is going to be, and in fact, officials here say that everybody will know when the shock and awe campaign begins. It's the massive demonstration of firepower. It's the effort to try to convince the Iraqis that there's absolutely no way that they can win, that there's no way they're going to survive if they fight. So you might see some of the large bombs like the 21,000 Moab bomb that we've talked about before. You'll see the 3,000 cruise missile strikes in the first couple of days. But as that happens, you're also going to see the other side of that, and that is you're going to continue to see some of these leaflets, some of these radio broadcasts from the flying radio station known as Commando Solo. These are the efforts to convince those Iraqis who see this intense firepower and decide that they don't want to fight. There is going to be some sort of option for them as far as surrendering.
Tell me about these leaflets. You were saying to me, it's what, 2 million of these things have been dropped right on the service people themselves. This is the first time this has happened, right?
Well, there are 2 million leaflets dropped on civilians over the last couple of days, but today, in fact, Wednesday, as it was here in the region, on Wednesday, Central Command said this was the first day that they actually dropped tens of thousands of leaflets directly on suspected Iraqi troop positions. And the leaflet said things like, to avoid destruction, follow coalition guidelines. And these guidelines included everything from flying white flags to gathering in groups to staying at least a kilometer away from vehicles to turning vehicles in sort of travel positions to indicate that they're clearly not in some sort of offensive maneuver. They have also instructed these Iraqi troops that if they do want to surrender, that the commanders are actually going to be allowed to carry their handguns, but the rest of the weapons must be discarded, and that all of these groups of troops, of Iraqi soldiers, should not approach coalition troops, but just wait for the coalition troops to give them instructions.
Great to see you on the show from over there. Thank you, David Schuster, who's in Qatar, a regular colleague of ours on the show. National Geographic Explorer's Peter Arnett is in Baghdad reporting exclusively on MSNBC, and he filed this report just a few hours ago.
There's absolutely no sign, of course, that President Saddam Hussein or his sons will quit office, as the United States has demanded. Consequently, we've seen lots of military activity on the streets here. Outside the main ministries, troops are lounging or at alert position. In the bunkers built around Baghdad in the past few weeks, there are troops now in position, particularly at intersections. Also, during the day, truckloads of soldiers driving through some of the main streets of Baghdad, cheering at the crowds in the neighborhoods. As far as the civilians are concerned, they've realized since President Bush's speech 2 days ago that the approaching war was inevitable. They've been stocking up in supplies. Shops are already shuttering. They're moving away their most valuable materials back home for safety, worried about bombing or looting. And the international community, pretty much down to the few here, all the diplomats have left. The UN command, all the inspectors, all the aid workers have gone, and the last journalists are straggling out of the country.
Thank you, Peter Arnett from Baghdad. Coming up next, Governor Bill Richardson of New Mexico, who personally met Saddam Hussein, will talk to us live about the dictator's last stand. And later, how will Israel react to Saddam Hussein when he sends Scuds their way? Israel's Consul General in New York, Alon Pincus, will be here on Hardball. You're watching it, Hardball.
Hardball is brought to you by Staples. Get back time. Go to Staples.
Morning. Before we start, if everyone could move page 15 2 pages up in the deck. And if your page 5 is fuzzy, just pass it down.
Unprofessional documents.
Page 8.
Lead to messy meetings.
Just remove it.
But at Staples, you'll get professional quality copying and printing. Our certified associates and 3-step quality process make sure your job is done right.
And this goes up.
Quality copying and printing. Staples. That was easy.
How about something with a pool?
A hunting lodge. Kids will love that. How about something with a pool?
Lots of photos and everything else you need to choose the hotel that's right for you.
Expedia.com. Coming up, what's Saddam Hussein's last stand? Governor Bill Richardson, who personally met with the Iraqi dictator to negotiate the release of 2 Americans, will be here to answer that question.
No matter where you are, MSNBC.com will email you breaking news, including the latest on the conflict with Iraq. Sign up now for MSNBC.com breaking news emails. Go to email.msnbc.com.
Well, there was one year where I almost lost the entire backyard to crabgrass, and I vowed that would never happen again. The following year, I did use Turf Builder plus Halts. It not only got rid of the crabgrass, but it also greened up the lawn and thickened it. I used the cheaper brands, but I didn't have the color that I wanted, and I did have the weeds. Look how thick it is. Look at the color of it. There are no weeds. I take the credit instead of Scott's. I call it Luby Lawn. I'm very proud of the results that I get from Scott's. And there will be no crabgrass.
Baymont Inns and Suites, worth checking into.
Now there's a better way to soothe your skin after shaving. Nivea for Men Aftershave Balm has advanced moisturizers and vitamins to soothe and improve your skin. Nivea for Men, more evolved skincare.
Solomon & Son Carpet's astounding annual St. Patrick's Week sale. Monday, March 17th through Saturday, March 22nd. Celebrates the savings of the green. Massive wall-to-wall showroom discounts. Monstrous savings of 20, 30, 40, even 50% off carpeting, vinyl tile, ceramic tile, area rugs, remnants, laminates. Hundreds of choices at once-a-year savings. All St. Patrick's Week long. The Solomon's roll out the green carpet. Solomon & Son, Sanford Street, Hamden off Dixwell Avenue. Be there.
Lewis and Clark, great explorers. Hi, I'm Thomas Jefferson. Would you check out the West for me? Oh, sure. And they take their keelboat up the Missouri. Oh, Buffalo. Then they built Fort Mandan. They're at 1804. Made some friends along the way. I'm Sacagawea. Through the Columbia Gorge. Ah!
There are tons of ways to help with your kids' learning. Find the really good ones on connectforkids.org.
The sweet Pacific Ocean. Yeah!
Governor Bill Richardson of New Mexico was America's ambassador to the UN during the Clinton administration in 1995. He met with Saddam Hussein to negotiate the release of 2 American prisoners in Iraq. Governor Richardson, thanks for joining us from New Mexico.
Thank you, Chris.
Well, you know, when you were in that room with Saddam Hussein, did it ever enter your mind that this guy was a killer and you were in the presence of a real fiend?
Well, yes. I remember vividly how he physically would try to intimidate me by staring very intently. He had all his revolutionary guards around with all their weapons. He had a weapon. At one point, he left the room because he felt I'd been a little ungracious. But I think one thing about Saddam Hussein, he is street smart. We cannot underestimate him. And I think right now he's probably in a state of denial because all he has is cabinet ministers, sycophants that are telling him how great he is. In fact, we had an intelligence report that he shot a cabinet minister on the spot when that cabinet minister offered just a little bit of dissent and offered any kind of reluctance to go along with Saddam. So don't underestimate him. That's my only message here because the guy has survived for so long.
Let me ask you about that psychological war he tried on you. Did you get a sense he was trying to intimidate you in the room, and did you stare him down? Did you try to counter-intimidate him?
Well, when I walked in, he kept letting me talk, and he has these beady little eyes. He's a very large guy, and you know, I got to admit, I was not exactly afraid-free.
Yeah.
But at the same time,
could you have taken him if it was just you two in the room and there's nobody around him? One-on-one,
yeah,
could you have taken him, Bill?
Yeah, I probably could have, but there were about 18 other Revolutionary Guards there that had all their weapons. But the guy tried to intimidate, but then when he realized he was not succeeding, I won't say he warmed up, but he became a little more reasonable. And at the end of the meeting, the guy actually smiled once, but the guy's cold-blooded. He's tough. He is somebody that is vicious, and I really believe he's in a state of denial right now because he doesn't travel. He doesn't apparently watch much international press.
Yeah.
And so all around him are Revolutionary Guards that are very skilled, that are very strong, that protect him, and are probably telling him that, you know, he's going to weather this through.
Well, let me ask you about one thing. I thought it's interesting about your account there, being in the room with him when he tried to outstare you. It seems to me that's a very reminiscent of Adolf Hitler, because even the people who loved Hitler would talk about that amazing stare of his, and we don't love Saddam Hussein. Let me ask you about what you think he's up to. Here's a guy that obviously lives pretty well. You saw his palaces. He's not an ascetic living off in the caves like bin Laden. Does he seem like the kind of guy to you that would try to take a hike, or does it look like he's going to balls out this thing right to the end?
No, he'll hang in there till the end. This guy has visions of martyrdom, but he is, I think, right now, I remember in the Clinton administration, he always had every night a different locale where he slept. He has so many palaces, but I am sure right now the Revolutionary Guard, which is a sizable group of very well-armed soldiers and security people, are ferreting him around, moving him around for security reasons. And I think he's going to be hard to find. I think that the Iraqi military will fall soon, but finding Saddam may be a little tougher than we think.
You know, Hitler, having studied world history, and you have too, you know, you realize that Hitler was able to hold together the German command around him so that they lost like 1 million men defending Berlin. To save his life a few extra days, thousands of people died per minute. Will this guy be able to hold together what you saw of his phalanx right to the end, or do you think somebody will break and just put a bullet in his head?
Well, I think in the end somebody will break, but it won't be instantaneous. He's bought off these Revolutionary Guards. They're very well trained. He gives them homes. He gives them stipends. He gives them the best weapons. He gives them automobiles. So they are intensely loyal, and they're skilled. So somebody will break. I think as a lot of Iraqi guards right now at the border seem to be moving towards surrendering, I think eventually somebody will turn them in of that elite Revolutionary Guard, but they'll hold on for a while, and he's got their total loyalty, and we can't underestimate his skill at public relations, at moving around, at trying to, you know, I just really worry about him using chemical and biological weapons because he is so.
You think he's quite ready to do that? You think he's quite the kind of guy that can do that kind of thing? Let me ask you about you're a politician. You've been elected a lot of offices over the years, governor and Congress before that for so many years. Do you think he has a legitimate hold on the people, or they will, as the advocates of this war have said so long from our side, they will collaborate, they will celebrate, they will cheer our arrival?
I think it's mixed, Chris. I mean, I've seen some of those crowds that seem to generate in demonstrations. When I was in Iraq, I sensed that he did have some support. I suspect that support is waning, and what you're seeing in the Iraqi population is, God, we want to get rid of this guy simply because the instability is so enormous. I wouldn't say that there's going to be shouting in the streets of glee, but I think his support is probably 50-50 if, you know, you could ever do a poll there, because he does have the armed forces there. The rural areas are with him, and I believe that, you know, he's used skillfully public relations when you control the media totally to build a cult of personality around him.
If he were allowed to stick around through this war and participate in the next election in Iraq, do you think he'd have a shot?
No, I don't think so. I think they'd want to get rid of him, but we cannot underestimate him.
Okay, thanks a lot, Bill Richardson. Great inside report on the psychology of the man we're fighting. Up next, Senator John Sununu of New Hampshire. John Sununu, the new. He's the kid. He's the senator. And later, as American troops gear up for war, Israeli civilians are preparing in case Saddam Hussein sends a Scud missile to Israel. We'll get an update from the Israeli representative in New York when Hardball returns.
They both worked their way up the ladder. Same executive perks, same six-figure salaries. So why does one look forward to early retirement, while the other looks forward to the 15th and the 31st? Some people already know Our financial representatives excel at a lot more than life insurance. Northwestern Mutual Financial Network. Are you there yet?
Drove on back to get to you.
Every time. Red.
Blue.
Leather.
Cloth.
Whoa. Now that's a car.
No, that's my car. I built it on the web, and they sent me that the next day. Printed and personalized. My color, my interior, where to go. They even gave me a free CD player. It can be here in a week.
Well, at least we talked about it.
Come on.
So, you want to open a checking account?
Yes, but I don't want to pay for it.
Right. And you want online banking?
Right, if it's free.
And unlimited online bill paying?
I don't want to have to pay for that either.
No. So you want total security protection on your check card, free?
Look, I just don't think I should have to pay for any of it.
Neither do we.
Free checking plus with direct deposit from Bank of America. Higher standards.
America's most popular camera series is now digital. Introducing the all-new, all-weather, all-digital Stylus. Olympus. Nothing's impossible.
What's so incredible?
This. The system must think I'm him.
Who?
Him.
Holy, that's all his stuff.
I can't believe we're in here.
Talk about your insider information.
Be cool. He can see us.
So...
Cover me. I'm going in.
Browser. Someone you never worry about when your systems are secure. Novell.
I'm saving $160 a night at this 4-star hotel.
A 3-star for $59 a night.
We're saving $100 a night in New York City.
We even got the kids in their own room.
Priceline now has the guaranteed best prices at top-of-the-line hotels. Save up to 40% off other leading online sites.
I paid $55 less than at Hotels.com.
$60 less than Expedia.
I told them the price.
The exact neighborhood.
And even how many stars, and they found it.
Now we'll stay at a hotel instead of the in-laws.
Top of the line, guaranteed.